Jason walked slowly down the street, thinking about his own thoughts. Yesterday's conversation with his son had touched a nerve, making his heart ache with pity. "Daddy, honey, take me away from here, please. Mummy doesn't care about me. She's not home all the time and I have to live with some strange aunt. And she also won't let me get a puppy. And she won't let me play with the boys." 8-year-old Martin blurted out in one breath. "Son, what happened? Where are you now and why isn't Mummy around?" Jason asked. Martin exclaimed into the receiver and then continued, but much quieter. Daddy, I'm sorry, honey. I can't talk anymore. It's not my phone. Come here right away and find Mom. Trust me, Daddy, they're up to something very bad." Jason tensed his whole body, sensing that his son was in a very unpleasant situation. Then the phone rang with a short beep. Jason tried to redial the number, but was unsuccessful. The indifferent voice of the network operator informed him that the caller was out of range. In a fit of despair, Jason was ready to climb the wall. He hadn't heard from his son in 3 years, after his wife obtained a divorce and took the child to the city at the age of 5 years. And now Martin has somehow found his phone number and is crying out for help. No, Jason wasn't a wuss, not at all. It's just that all this time he'd mistakenly believed his son was doing well in the city, when in fact things had turned out differently. "Jesus, where am I supposed to go? I don't know the address." "No, I've been to the city, of course, but Brittany's moved around so many times. I can't find her without help," Jason exclaimed. He didn't know his ex-wife's phone number either. It wasn't because he wasn't worried about his son, not at all. It was just that at some point in time, Brittany had done everything she could to make sure he could never find her. What about Mrs. Jennifer? She's a woman with connections. Maybe she could help. She'll put you in touch with the right person. It's no use going to the police. What am I going to say? That my son rang me and complained about his mom. And I'm such a good father that I haven't seen him for 3 years. And I'm short of money. I spent it all on engine repairs. Now you're going to have to bite your elbows, Jason thought, pulling his small savings out of the box. He took the evening train and the next day he was in town. After the cozy quiet of the village, the metropolis seemed like a huge hive of bees, with people playing the role of bees. From the abundance of new shop windows was rippling in his eyes, and the endless stream of cars did not allow him to concentrate on something specific. It was late autumn. The wind lazily drove along the embankment, the remnants of shriveled leaves, which the wipers had not yet had time to remove. Wrapped in a thin jacket, Jason walked slowly toward the bridge, where he had a good view of the river and the city. But he was in a bad mood. Worry about his young son kept him on his toes, making his heart clench at the mere thought of him. Suddenly, Jason's attention was drawn to the screeching of brakes and the loud shouts of bystanders scattering in different directions. At the same time, there was the clang of iron and the sound of metal hitting metal. Jason flinched and froze. What the young tractor driver saw next made him uneasy. He had to act now, for the seconds were counting. He could only guess what the accident victim was feeling at that moment. Veronica's heart was pounding like crazy. The car did not obey her and seemed alien. The speed was decent, but the brakes. Where were the brakes? God, what's going on? Only managed to shout the girl. And then the SUV rammed the protective fence of the bridge and collapsed into the water. Veronica felt like she was watching a documentary film flashing before her. The impact of her chin on the steering wheel, the sharp pain and the tears that came to her eyes. Then the illusion of flight, when the body seemed weightless, and again a thud which Veronica felt completely. The car shuddered, and tumbling sideways like a wounded animal, went down like a stone. At the same time, the interior of the SUV began to fill with icy water. Her legs were instantly cramped, squeezing them like vice grips around her ankles and knees. The realization of the disaster that had befallen her made Veronica scream in pain and fear. The car sank quickly, like the legendary Titanic in the turbulent waters of the Atlantic. Screaming was useless, and Veronica realized that as no one else could. How long did she have left? A minute, 2. And then the river would take her into its depths, leaving only memories in the hearts of her loved ones. The impact jammed the door. She couldn't get out straight after falling into the river. There was still the passenger door, but you had to reach it. And in such difficult conditions, it was almost impossible, especially for a fragile girl paralyzed by fear and a sense of hopelessness. Only a miracle could save Veronica. But where could it be, this miracle? Gathering the rest of her strength, she tried to reach the passenger door, but it was impossible. Tears were pouring in hail. The water came up to her chest, filling her body with pain, like 1,000 icy needles digging into her skin. Veronica closed her eyes, determined not to face her doom. And then there was a violent crack, and the windscreen was covered with a network of cracks. Veronica shuddered. A flicker of hope flickered in her soul. It was difficult to make out anything in the murky water, but when the impact was repeated, she saw a shadow, the owner of which was clearly trying to help her. But will he be able to do it in time? The water had already reached her chin, and Veronica screamed with all her might. "Help, please." The third blow was decisive, after which the windscreen flew off, and the water immediately filled the cabin up to the roof. Veronica had no time to get air into her lungs, and losing consciousness, felt something strong on her wrist, obviously a man's hand. Then some unknown force pulled her upwards, towards the light and the desired air. When Veronica came to, her body was shaking violently. Her teeth were beating out a characteristic drumbeat. The gawkers gathered on the shore were watching with the look of TV viewers who had come to watch an interesting film or show. "Hey, are you okay?" "Can you talk?" Slapping Veronica's cheeks, the stranger asked. "I can. Please don't hurt me. I've come round. Really. It's just very cold," Veronica replied and looked up at her savior. He was a skinny man in his 30s in wet clothes and with a huge scar from a burn on his cheek, as if he didn't notice the cold. He looked at Veronica with his gray eyes, in which there was a sly sparkle. "We should call an ambulance." "What are you standing there for? She's going to get hypothermia," said one of the bystanders. Immediately after that, a murmur of approval spread through the crowd, as if no one could have thought of such a simple thing before. Immediately someone took off his coat and tried to wrap the shivering girl in it. "Thank you. I'm actually Veronica Miller. Maybe you've heard of me." The stranger shook his head negatively, then added, "No, I haven't. And I'm Jason Davis." As Veronica had already warmed up a little, she asked with a smile, "Did you come from the village?" "Everyone in town knows my father. Miller Cook Concern. Well, Miller and Company." Jason pressed his lips together resentfully. "Why, is it that obvious?" "Yeah, from the country. It's not far, actually." Veronica realized at once from his tone that she'd overreacted, and instead of thanking her savior, she made him blush. She wanted to say something else, but at that moment she heard a siren. The ambulance arrived, and in a minute Veronica was surrounded by doctors who helped her up and onto a car. Despite the fact that she strongly refused to be hospitalized, it was decided to take her to the ward for examination. Almost no one paid attention to the rescuer, who picked up his jacket from the pavement and walked towards the city park. Jason didn't like the attention to his own person, because he was a modest guy by nature, and if he did something good, he didn't expect immediate gratitude or recognition for it. He was also very embarrassed about the scar on his face. Who would want to look at a man who's a little prettier than Quasimodo? He thought, stepping up to cover his face. Jason thought as he walked down the autumn leaf-covered alley. He had nowhere to go. The big city pressed him with the frantic rhythm of life and the frightening unknown. It was like in the village, where everything seemed clear and native. A small, well-groomed vegetable garden, a young orchard, and a river full of fish. You could catch fish for 24 hours a day. You couldn't catch enough, and there was no point. Brittany was so mean to me. Couldn't she have done something different? He whispered, trying to ignore the cold from his soaked clothes. The only person Jason could turn to for help in town was the orphanage's caretaker, Mrs. Jennifer. Rumor had it that the old woman was often ill and, having no children of her own, could only rely on the help of former pupils, one of whom was Jason. It was Mrs. Jennifer who had once helped him get a place to live in the village. "I know you like the open spaces, the woods, fishing. What's in the city for you? You'll only suffer. Don't be sorry. The house, of course, is not a palace. It needs some work, some repairs. But if you're not lazy, you won't regret it. Take my word for it," said the wise woman. Jason agreed, and later on he thanked his favorite tutor for her good advice. He learned the tractor driver's trade in the village and became one of the most valuable and skilled workers on the farm. Like many of the orphanage's former pupils, Jason deep down thought of Mrs. Jennifer as his mother. That's the common one, the one for everyone. So if he was in an extremely difficult situation, he could only turn to her for help because he didn't have her mobile phone number. He decided to go to her house. Fortunately, he hadn't forgotten the address, 13 6th Avenue Street. Jason's memory was always excellent. What can I say? Everything's going to be okay. Mrs. Jennifer will listen to me and be sure to give me the advice I need. She's got a lot more contacts in town. She'll be able to help me, Jason said to himself like an incantation. At the same time, the girl he'd rescued had already undergone a medical examination, and after a short meeting of the doctors, she was placed in a cozy IP palace for rest and a little medical therapy. Truth be told, the doctors just backed up, fearing possible repercussions from her influential father. No, let her stay under observation for now. Vitamins there, rest, or God forbid she gets sick. Who'll take responsibility then? Her father's going to charge us, and we'll be in trouble, and the clinic will be raided. So we do not have the right to make a mistake, with pressure on the last phrase, said the head of the therapeutic department. The staff did not have to repeat twice. Having received the necessary instructions from their superiors, doctors and nurses immediately surrounded Veronica with such care, as if she was a special royal blood with the right to claim the throne of their kingdom. No, it did not mean that the other patients were left without attention and help. The nursing staff could not afford that. Veronica understood the doctor's instructions, and at first did not add to their problems by complaining to her father. Lying on the couch, she closed her eyes and mentally replayed the first half of the day in her memory. In doing so, she was most interested in one very important question. What had happened to the SUV's brakes? Could they have failed due to natural causes? Veronica thought about it, trying to remember everything that had preceded the accident. The weather had been bad this morning. It had rained the day before, and during the night, it had frozen over, which had left the road covered with a slightly noticeable crust of ice. But Veronica did not mind that at all. Firstly, it was not the first year she had been driving, and secondly, the new SUV, given to her by her father, looked reliable and had already managed to show itself in business. In fact, there was no hurry. In the office, work was going on as usual, and Veronica could easily control the process even from home. Well, modern technology is a serious thing, and those who use them in their everyday life benefit in many ways. The initiator of the installation of SCECT cameras in the walls of the company was his father, Mr. Oswald. Why, it's a very good option, daughter. The whole office is in the palm of your hand, and the employees are under control. Trust is a good thing, of course, but a checkup is never a bad thing. Veronica was not particularly inspired by her father's idea at the time. It was only after some time that she realized the full benefit of such a proposal, especially after she personally identified in the walls of the office skillfully concealed mole, an employee who worked for competitors. Since then, Veronica occasionally resorted to the help of video cameras, reviewing the recordings as needed. To some extent, it allowed her to save time and do several things at the same time. But today, Veronica needed to be in the office because she had a quarterly report coming up that she couldn't ignore. That was the reason why she got into the car and drove towards the center. If only Veronica could have known what would happen to her on the embankment in just a minute. She wouldn't have driven the sub today for anything in the world. Veronica had been given it by her father for her birthday, which she had celebrated in the best restaurant in town. Mr. Oswald hadn't made a mistake. Veronica had long dreamed of such a car, considering it the best in this price segment. And here you are, a brake malfunction that almost cost her her life. It's not a good thing. My father's wedding is coming up, and I drowned the car and almost died, Veronica thought sadly. On the other hand, Mr. Oswald's feelings for his beloved were so strong that no one could prevent him from getting married. Veronica, on the other hand, regarded Vanessa with a certain amount of indifference. What was there to like about her? Just another long-legged, well-groomed beauty who clearly knew her worth. Sure, she looks younger than her age, but that's not unreasonable with the possibilities of Daddy's wallet. It's pretty easy, Veronica told her best friend. Oh, come on. What are you, jealous or something? It's your dad's choice. And I think he knows best, Annie objected. Veronica didn't want to argue. She couldn't remember her mom, and her father had brought her up from an early age. and he did it in the most manly way he could, with a few kinks. Well, how could it be otherwise when you have to develop your business and take care of your little daughter at the same time? And his competitors, again, were clearly not going to take a nap. So Mr. Oswald had to get out of it and run the business with an iron hand. By and large, he never offended Veronica and tried to be attentive to her requests. During her school years, he had punished her a couple of times, but no more than that. Veronica loved her father and therefore accepted his choice with due humility. With Vanessa, Mr. Oswald met at one of the corporate parties, arranged by representatives of a partner firm. Always cautious businessman somehow immediately fell under the influence of this beauty, whose appearance instantly caused excitement among the male employees. No, Mr. Oswald had not lost his head. Not at all. In his own opinion, he was no longer of an age to run headlong after the first woman he met. But there was something about Vanessa that made the businessman's heart flutter like a young boy's. Veronica only wondered how literally before her eyes changed her father. It manifested itself in small things, outwardly unnoticeable to outsiders. But Veronica knew her father like no one else, and therefore from time to time emphasized it in conversation with him. "Your new perfume is so nice, and your suit too. You look like a real groom," Veronica said. "Yes. But as Sylvester would say, what fiancé? My time is past. It's you young ones who have still got your time," replied Mr. Oswald. Veronica smiled. Her father was obviously being modest, for by his 50s he looked simply gorgeous. Vanessa, on the other hand, was about 35. Such a noticeable difference in age did not frighten her, especially since, according to her father, she was already married and brought up an 8-year-old son. The boy had already visited them several times, and at such times Mr. Oswald blossomed like a spring flower. Veronica knew that her father had once dreamed of a son, from whom he intended to make a successor to his financial empire. But when his daughter was born, Mr. Oswald quickly adapted and understood that the sex of the child is not important. The main thing is that he is his own, native and loved. And a girl or a boy, what difference does it make as long as he was healthy? Everything else will be added. But when the businessman saw on the walls of his house a little boy, his heart literally squeezed with tenderness. Here is his son, even if still very young, but will grow up. After all, the little man will succeed him as head of the company, and in time will stand in line with the recognized leaders of the business elite. So Veronica did not remember the name of Vanessa's son. She had seen him only a couple of times, and she remembered only a glimpse of the boy's big gray eyes, in which there was an inexpressible sadness. It was hard to tell for sure, though. It could be that this was just a normal expression on his face. Frankly speaking, Vanessa rarely brought her son to Mr. Oswald's house, and did so only when he insisted. Most of the time she was either at the office or relaxing with her friends in a cozy cafe. Why take offense? Father has the right to a private life, and she herself is not a little girl. She understands everything. Veronica was pulled out of the state of anxious reflection by the gushing trill of her smartphone. As soon as she put the speaker to her ear, she immediately heard her father's voice. "Veronica, hi, I already know everything. How are you? Is everything all right? Should we get the doctor from the center involved? Or who else?" "Don't be silent, daughter," Mr. Oswald asked excitedly. "Dad, calm down. Nothing terrible has happened. I did drown your present, though. I'm sorry, but there was nothing I could do. I tried to turn the steering wheel, but everything got so out of control," Veronica replied. There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. Veronica knew that her father had no regrets about the ruined car. The main thing is that his daughter is alive, and the car is there today and gone tomorrow. What's the point of grieving? "All right, daughter. Don't worry about anything. We'll sort it out. I'll address the head of security service. Let him sort out what's going on. Maybe they sold it at the salon with a defect. I don't think so, though. But don't be sad, get well. I'll come back later, but closer to the evening." "Well, goodbye," said Mr. Oswald. Veronica thanked her father for his concern and ended the call by tapping her finger on the smartphone screen. Her forehead creased into 2 slightly visible wrinkles that only appeared when she was in anxious thought. She disliked her father's chief of security with all her heart. Sylvester was a complicated man whose biography had many dark spots. While it was rumored that in the past he had worked in security services, from which he had been dismissed for abuse of authority, Mr. Oswald liked him because he could solve almost any problem. a competitor putting its tentacles where they shouldn't. The IRS, the fire department, everything was under Sylvester's control. He could solve anything. No, he never went outside the law, at least not openly. He'd learned the lessons of the past, but Veronica felt that if the head of the security service was given a free hand, he could make a mess of things. He could do things that would be bad for the others. It was for this very reason that Veronica did not want Sylvester to investigate the circumstances of the accident, because everywhere he appeared, he sowed fear, panic, and outright despondency. She was also well aware that her father paid the head of security to keep an eye on her, especially in matters relating to fiancés. It looked like this: as soon as Veronica had a new suitor, Sylvester would gather a file on him and bring it to Mr. Oswald. After that, as was to be expected, the potential suitor's candidacy was considered in several aspects at once, which did not help his rapprochement with the businessman's daughter. Jason was already approaching the right address when he saw that the shutters on Mrs. Jennifer's house were tightly closed. Is she going to bed so early? But dusk was still hours away. He approached the gate cautiously and, rising on tiptoe, peered into the yard. There was a weighty lock hanging on the front door. That meant the landlady wasn't home. Jason's mood soured immediately. What kind of person am I? Couldn't I have gotten her phone number sooner? And now where can I find her? Despair swept over him again. How did I manage to screw up so badly? 30 years old, but I acted like a boy. At that moment, the door to the house across the street opened, and a dandelion-haired old woman appeared on the porch. She looked at Jason, then asked, "But aren't you here to see Mrs. Jennifer, dear man?" "Yes, to see her." "Do you know where she is?" Jason asked, confused. Grandma perked up at once. "I know. Why wouldn't I know? She's in the hospital, honey. She hasn't been feeling too good lately. She's in therapy, I think. But you'd better check with the registrar's office to make sure. You're all wet, aren't you? Come in and warm up a little, have some tea and coffee, dry off, and then you can go," the old woman suggested. Jason refused at first. It was uncomfortable. But then, seeing the sincere joy in her eyes, he agreed. Mrs. Mary was a lonely woman. Her children had long ago left the country, and her husband had been gone for 10 years. When Mrs. Mary saw that her guest's teeth were aching from the cold, she brought him a change of clothes left by her son. "But here you go, you don't have to return it. It's been too small for my bill for a long time. I think it'll be just right for you," she said. Jason smiled embarrassedly, then went into the bathroom to change. He'd had good luck with nice people today. He wished he could catch Mrs. Jennifer in good health. Fortunately, Mrs. Mary didn't ask any questions. She placed a cup of tea and a tray of fresh pastries on the table and sat down modestly on the sidelines. Jason ate with the greed of a hungry beast. It was understandable he'd been on his feet all day and hadn't had a dewdrop in his mouth, and he would have liked to stay longer. But time was running out. All the more reason Mrs. Jennifer might need his help. "But you come by if you need anything, and in fact say hello. Tell her the neighbor is waiting impatiently." "How am I going to be here without her?" Mrs. Mary said goodbye. Jason thanked the kind grandmother for her help and, closing the door behind him, hurried to the clinic to see his former carer. In the therapy department, the visitor was treated sympathetically, although he was reprimanded for not showing up sooner. "But where have you been all this time?" "Young man, your grandmother needs care and care of loved ones, you know. Well, and, of course, on our part we will do our best. But you must help too. She's an elderly person," the doctor said. Jason lowered his eyes guiltily. What else could he say that Mrs. Jennifer wasn't related to him? Although deep down Jason thought of her as his mother and grandmother at the same time. Probably everyone who had passed through her hands within the walls of the orphanage thought so. "All right, young man, you can see Mrs. Jennifer," the doctor concluded. "But I have a favor to ask of you. Don't be too shaken up. Take care and respect the patient's age. And our job too. Ward 6 is down the corridor, straight ahead and to the left," the doctor added, seeing the remorse in his eyes. Jason didn't hear the doctor's last words as he rushed to the man who had done so much good for him that it was hard to describe in words. As he opened the door of the room, he froze in indecision. Mrs. Jennifer was lying on the couch, apparently dozing. She had lost a lot of weight in recent years. It was understandable. The years had taken their toll. Tears came to Jason's eyes. How long had it been since they'd seen each other? 7 years at least. No more. When he heard the door open, Mrs. Jennifer opened her eyes and smiled. "Jason's here. Remember me still, don't you?" "How could anyone forget you? You've done so much for me." Jason mumbled embarrassedly and came closer, sitting down on the edge of the bed. He took Mrs. Jennifer's dry hand in his palm. "I've been sick, Jason. Since autumn came, I haven't been able to go out at all," she said. He lowered his eyes guiltily. Jason felt that perhaps if he'd been in his former teacher's life sooner, hospitalization would have been avoided. "Is there anything I can help you with? Go to the pharmacy or something?" Jason asked. Mrs. Jennifer sighed tiredly. "No, Jason, I've got everything, medicine and groceries in my nightstand. You better tell me about yourself. I can sense you're in trouble. I can see it in your eyes. And that scar on your cheek. You didn't have it before." Jason touched his face with his palm, as if he hoped to wipe it away like theater makeup. But no matter how hard you tried, the scar wouldn't go away. "I got it in a fire, Mrs. Jennifer." The woodland caught fire, smoke billowing. And then the fire spread to a wheat field, and I see the she-wolf caught in the ring of fire. I guess she wanted to escape. She's frantic. She can't get out, so I threw myself into the fire. Mrs. Jennifer gasped in amazement. "Did you? You did?" Jason smiled oddly and rubbed his cheek again. "I did. But the flames didn't spare me. It's all over my face and my shoulders. What's there to say? It's all too obvious." Mrs. Jennifer looked lovingly at her former pupil. "I recognized the old Jason used to be like that. You were very fond of animals. I remember when a little puppy fell down a manhole in the sewer. So you went down after it, but you couldn't get back up. The whole teaching staff was looking for you, and we couldn't find you," the former teacher said. Jason blushed to the roots of his hair, making the scar on his face even more visible. "Why family, honey? I thought you were married. I remember you wrote to me once, asking me to marry you. I couldn't make it work." Jason grimaced, but answered the question. "No, I don't have a family anymore. My wife filed for divorce 3 years ago, then took my son and moved to New York. Martin is now 8 years old. Everything seemed fine up until then. But recently Martin called me secretly from his mother and said that she does not give him any time. So I decided to take her to court to terminate her parental rights. Or whatever you call it, that's why I came to you. Maybe you can point me in the direction of someone who might be able to help me." So Mrs. Jennifer thought for a moment. Her pupil's story had struck a nerve. How could it be? Such a nice bloke. His wife left him and took his son with her. What's wrong with that, she thought. "Tell you what, Jason, I'll try to help you, of course. I've got 3 more days in the hospital. When I get out of the hospital, we'll get to work on your case. Will you be patient, honey?" Jason was glad, smiling. "Sure, I'll wait. I just need a place to stay." "That's not a problem. I'll give you the keys to the house, so you can stay as long as you need. Here, take these. There's one for the door, one for the gate," Mrs. Jennifer said at once, handing him a bunch. Tears came to Jason's eyes. Of course he knew that Mrs. Jennifer would help him, but to have her solve the housing problem so easily. "Please get well. And I won't let you down," Jason exclaimed with barely contained excitement. She smiled and wished him luck. He left Mrs. Jennifer's room in a better mood. He felt lightheaded, and a pleasant tune was playing in his head. In fact, he had already tried to take his son away from his ex-wife, Brittany, but it had all failed. Brittany had always had a stubborn temper, and her demands were so high, the villagers marveled. Why did she marry a poor tractor driver? What could Jason give a pretty girl from the city, housing from the Social Security Fund, or a little hard-earned money? It's only at first glance it seems easy to be a tractor driver. The equipment is old, it breaks down all the time, and the workload is so heavy that 2 people can't always do it. But Brittany didn't realize that. She did whatever she wanted. She didn't take care of the vegetable garden. Why was it overgrown with weeds after the first rain? Starting a farm was out of the question. The neighbor said, "Oh, you got married too soon, Jason. Oh, you rushed it. She's a good-for-nothing, your wife. You can't do that in the country. Even a farmer's wife goes out into the once in a while, but your Brittany thinks herself superior to others. Jason listened silently, not snapping at her, but how could he explain to the neighbors that you, a boy from the orphanage, had fallen madly in love? Jason guessed that his feelings weren't entirely mutual, but when you're in love, it's so nice to be deluded that the realization makes your head spin and your blood boil. Unfortunately, the sobering experience was painful. At one not-so-great moment, Brittany filed for divorce and took Martin out on the town with town. Many said that she was going to a pre-prepared place in the arms of a rich lover from the metropolis. Divorce came out painful. According to the court, Martin stayed with his mother, and Jason was appointed to pay alimony. What's child support? Jason sent his son his entire paycheck, every cent of it. He was his favorite, the only one. How could he not be loved? So at first Jason thought his ex-wife would let him see his son at least on weekends, or at least a couple of times a month. But in fact, the reality was much worse than the young tractor driver thought. Brittany not only forbade Jason to see the child, but also sent her new lover's men to him, who beat him up heartily and almost burned down the house. But Jason wasn't afraid of the beatings. Then a very unpleasant man with the eyes of a hardened criminal came to him and, pinning him against the wall, said, "Listen, you tractor driver, and if you don't leave Brittany alone, you're going to go to jail, and for a long time. I guarantee you that. I don't need Brittany. Just give me a chance to see my son," Jason claimed. But the answer was a painful kick in the ribs. Jason had not seen his son for 3 years. Martin's a groom too, he thought wistfully. No, Jason had not given up and was determined to fight to the end, no matter what. But he had decided to act from the side of the law, not from the side of brute force. That's what he needed Mrs. Jennifer, who over the years of working at the orphanage had raised many lawyers or police officers from former orphans. The most interesting thing was that, being in the building of the first city hospital, Jason had no idea that not far from Mrs. Jennifer's room was the girl he had rescued. Veronica had already recovered enough and intended to leave the hospital today, but the head of the ward had his own plans for such an important patient. Mr. Andrew was already imagining the scene when Mr. Oswald would shake his hand and thank him for saving his daughter. So what if the businessman's daughter was saved by some nameless tramp? What matters is what's remembered last. That is the department in which Veronica was given every possible help and assistance. Of course, wanting to thank the superintendent, Mr. Oswald will donate equipment to the clinic and maybe pay for modern renovations. Because of all these benefits that will be showered on the clinic, the head doctor will thank him, Mr. Andrew, when the chief leaves for promotion to the ministry. The head of therapy will take his place. An admirable combination. It was not for nothing that Mr. Andrew spent so much time playing chess, planning his moves 2 steps ahead, and you'll always be on the plus side. But with Veronica, the far-sighted doctor had miscalculated, for it was she who had checkmated his opponent in 2 moves, hitting him where he least expected it. No, I'm not staying here another minute. You hear me? My dad's getting married in 2 days. You want him to get married knowing his daughter's in the hospital. So, but you got hypothermia, didn't you? You'll have a relapse tomorrow, a relapse, so to speak. And who will be to blame? The doctor objected uncertainly. So Mr. Andrew had already realized that Veronica could not be reasoned with. She was on the same wavelength with him and could easily ruin his plans. If you don't let me go today, I'll call my father and then you'll have to explain it all to him. Believe me, it's not a pleasant experience. At the mention of Veronica's father, Mr. Andrew finally gave up. He didn't want to quarrel with such an influential businessman. It was better to let the stubborn girl go and let her do whatever she wanted. Well, Veronica, since you're really feeling so well, I won't keep you any longer. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. A satisfied smile appeared on the girl's lips. At last now she would be able to pay attention to her father, who was having such a celebration in a couple of days. When she left the hospital room, she was on her way out when she bumped into her savior in the hall. Jason, what are you doing here? I didn't expect to see you here. You were in such a hurry to get somewhere, and you left so suddenly. I didn't even have time to thank you. Jason smiled embarrassedly. I'm sorry, I'm really in a hurry. I've only been here a few days, and I have so much to do. Don't worry about it. I don't need any thanks. That's not why I rushed to your rescue. Well, if that's not the reason, then let's go get something to eat at the cafe. It's my treat. Really? I have to do something to thank my savior." Jason hesitated. The knowledge he picked up in the library of the orphanage kept him from accepting the girl's invitation. After all, he was the man, the cavalier. He must be gallant and attentive. But how can you be when you've got so little money in your pocket? "Come on, let's go. Why are you standing there like that? I can see in your eyes that you're hungry. Come on, don't be so tough," Veronica insisted. Jason gave in. Soon they were sitting in a cozy cafe, enjoying the best dishes from their extensive menu, looking at each other with a smile. Veronica felt an inexplicable sympathy for this quiet, silent man with kind gray eyes. At some point, a very interesting thought flashed through her mind. "Jason, listen, here's the thing. Anyway, my dad's getting married in 2 days. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people there. I don't really have anyone to go with. Maybe you can help." The young tractor driver almost dropped his fork from his hands in surprise. He tried so hard to match his companion, unsuccessfully fighting with a knife, which did not want to cut the meat. And now his hands were down. "I'm going to a wedding. Nobody knows me there. And what are you going to tell your dad? Who are you going to introduce him as?" "A traveling tractor driver from the village." "Why do you say that?" "I'll introduce him as my fiancé. Well, fake, of course, if you don't mind. My father wants to marry me off a long time ago, and at his own wedding he'll certainly raise a toast or two to my future marriage." "Well, do you agree? Help me out," Veronica begged. Jason frowned. In all honesty, he didn't know why he wanted a wedding when he'd come to take his son back to the village. "Maybe we should give it a try. Maybe he'll make some important acquaintances. Except I don't want to look like a temporary beau." "Fiancé for the evening. What kind of word is that? As if you could rent a feeling," Jason's mind flashed. Veronica went on, realizing that her companion was having doubts. "Jason, don't worry. And if you're worried about the suit, I'll buy it for you. Tonight. You don't need any money. Think of it as a reward. You saved a businessman's daughter. I think that's worth a lot. A lot more than this dinner multiplied by 1,000 times." Jason smiled. Veronica had a way with persuasion, and she was a master at it. "All right, let's go. Just promise not to introduce me to your father." "I won't. He'll start interrogating you. Where he was born, who he was baptized with. What am I going to say? He's an orphanage boy?" Veronica nodded in agreement. In her mind, she had already pictured the face of Sylvester's head of when he saw the fiancé of the boss's daughter, about whom he knew nothing. Of course, a little later Jason regretted his hasty decision, but it was too late. The next stop on their journey was a fashionable men's clothing store. When he saw the price of the suit Veronica intended to buy, Jason's eyes widened. "Oh, no. That's too expensive. I can't save up for something like that in 6 months. Take it. It's to replace the stuff you soaked when you jumped in the river after me. So if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have needed a dress for Dad's wedding." Jason nodded, though he felt uncomfortable. At that very moment, across town in Mr. Oswald's office, there was a considerable conversation going on. "What do you think, Sylvester? Did you find out what happened to Veronica's car?" asked the businessman. The head of security paused for a second or two, then said, "We're looking, Mr. Oswald. The sub is at the bottom of the river, and we have to get it out of there. And it's not quick, and it's a bit of a hassle. But if you're looking for my opinion, it was the driver's fault. Veronica was speeding. The car was new, so she lost control." When Mr. Oswald raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Yes, but I think you're just underestimating my Veronica. She's been driving for years. It's true, she's had a simpler car in the past." "That's true. But Veronica clearly said that her car had a brake failure." And Sylvester glanced at the owner, but he refrained from commenting. Sylvester had long thought himself to be taller than he really was. And this pompous turkey, who was actively preparing for the wedding, irritated him more and more, and Sylvester left the office without saying goodbye, showing his boss's tough temper. Mr. Oswald looked at him, then turned to the window. Outside, the children were playing in the street, not at all frightened by the autumn winds of the thaw. They raced against each other, with joyful shouting, fought on swords made of broken twigs, and covered their heads with piles of fallen leaves. "Soon I'll have a little boy like that. 8 years old is the right age to play. And I'll take him fishing, to the ski slides. A life will soon come, the businessman thought with a smile. Leaving the owner's house, Sylvester almost nose to nose with his fiancée Vanessa. The woman gave the head of security a mocking look, then said, "Well, how did you screw up so badly, Sylvester? You're a professional, aren't you? Or was it so hard to get rid of that girl?" Sylvester frowned. "That's none of your business. You better watch yourself, lest he change his mind. He might not want to marry you. I won't be able to find you another handsome man like that." Vanessa winked at him, tapping her heels, and went into the house. Sylvester clenched his fists, realizing that it was not yet time. So when Mr. Oswald married Vanessa, they would be able to make the most of it. In the meantime, they'd better keep quiet and keep a low profile. But if they can't get rid of the girl, they'll do it next time, and then the father can be taken care of. After she'd bought everything she needed for herself and Jason, Veronica handed him a bag of clothes. "Here, a car will pick you up on the day of the wedding. Maybe the driver will, or maybe I'll go myself." "Thanks, Veronica. I won't let you down." "You know, that would really be the best reward for me," Jason replied with feeling. Soon they parted and went their separate ways. Veronica went to her father's luxurious mansion, and Jason went to Mrs. Jennifer's small outbuilding. As he entered the older woman's house with the bag in his hands, Jason felt a sense of unease. He'd never been here alone before. Mrs. Jennifer had always welcomed him as if he were a beloved son or nephew. So when Jason opened the kitchen cupboard, he saw that its door was held on a single hinge and could come off at the worst possible moment. "I'll have to fix it." There's no one to help an old man, Jason thought with a twinge of conscience. The furniture was the same all over the house, without exception. The interior doors creaked and needed oiling, and the wooden window frames were crumbling and in need of replacement, making the house draughty almost everywhere. And since Jason couldn't stay idle for long, he opened the pantry and searched for tools to help him fix up his kindly carer's house a little. He found a couple of screwdrivers and pliers and set to work. And began to work on the repairs. And there was only one thing on Jason's mind. What about his son? "All right, I'll go to the wedding with Veronica and then ask for her help. Mrs. Jennifer needs a rest after all. Besides, she hasn't been released from the hospital. She's way ahead of me." Jason tried to reassure himself. So it sounded like a poor excuse, but on the other hand, he had no other choice. The 2 days left before the wedding flew by quickly. Jason, pleased with the progress of the home repairs, began cleaning up the yard, bagging up the fallen leaves and loading them into the bin, then fixing the fence, which was leaning in on one side, and oiling the rusty hinges on the gate. On the appointed day, Jason shaved, then took a bath and dressed in his wedding attire. His patent leather shoes shined like new, and his suit and shirt fit like new. Jason thought back to his wedding, when he'd gone to the county registry office wearing clothes he'd bought on sale. No, he'd bought Brittany an expensive, nice dress, but as usual, he skimped on himself. What's the point of all this beauty? When he met Veronica at the agreed place, Jason gasped in amazement. She'd been pretty before, but now she was a real beauty. The elegant dress was a perfect fit for her statuesque figure. The heels added grace, and a tasteful handbag added the final touch to her spectacular image. "Let's take a taxi and go to the registry office. I think the father and bride are already there," Veronica said. Jason nodded in agreement, still impressed by the ineffable beauty of his companion. As Veronica had expected, the registry office was crowded with business people, city officials, and VIPs from neighboring cities. And they surrounded the newlyweds in a dense ring, waiting for the moment to shout a resounding bidder. Seeing such a crowd of people, Jason was immediately embarrassed, but Veronica immediately took control of the situation. "Follow me," she said, deftly cutting into the crowd of invitees, intending to go to his father and Vanessa. As it turned out, the bride was not standing alone, but with her son, who was dressed in the same smart suit as the groom. Everyone who looked at this moment at the young mother and her son could not hold back tears of emotion. They looked very organized and beautiful in such smart clothes. As Jason was led by Veronica, he didn't even notice how he found himself in the center of the small square where the newlyweds and their closest relatives were standing. But no sooner had Jason taken a few steps than he heard a child's loud cry. "Daddy, Daddy, did you find me?" The crowd gasped in amazement, and Jason turned his head to the right and saw Martin standing next to his mother, whose face was unfamiliar to him. Son, how did you get here? Where's Mummy? Now it was Mr. Oswald's turn to wonder. Daughter, who is this man? And why does he call Martin his son? Veronica shrugged her shoulders in amazement, not knowing what to say. Martin broke free of Vanessa's embrace and sprinted toward his father. Tears streamed from Jason's eyes as he held the child he hadn't seen in so many years. The boy had grown and stretched, becoming a schoolboy. Vanessa, will you at least tell me what's going on here? Mr. Oswald asked, looking at his fiancée. But he did not wait for an answer. Vanessa stood silent, as if someone had silenced her for years with one stroke. The bride's face was red with shame, and in her eyes there was a universal anger for everyone in the room. Taking his son's hand, Jason looked around the room and almost immediately saw his ex-wife, Brittany. She was standing side by side with Sylvester, who was also familiar to the tractor driver from previous run-ins. Brittany lowered her eyes guiltily. Dad, they made me lie to this man, pretending to be Aunt Vanessa's son, Martin said. But I know who my real mom and dad are, Martin exclaimed, touching his father's beloved face with his palm. And only now the plan of the conspirators became clear to Jason. Brittany had provided her son Martin as a bait for hire, and the bait was to be taken by none other than Mr. Oswald, who had long dreamed of having a son. The calculation of the swindlers was simple. Seeing the beautiful Vanessa and a charming little boy, the businessmen melted and immediately surrounded the young mother of attention. All this would have been doomed to failure if Sylvester did not know perfectly well that the boss just dreams of a son and heir. That's why the cunning insolent and decided to play on the feelings of blinded by new dreams of the businessman. A few people knew that shortly before meeting Vanessa, Mr. Oswald even visited the orphanage to adopt a boy. And then, thanks to Sylvester's fake news, it just happened. Why don't you say something? Tell me who Martin's real mom is, or are you going to continue this circus? Jason looked at Brittany defiantly and exclaimed. Mr. Oswald looked at Sylvester's roommate and knew immediately that Jason knew what he was talking about. The businessman shook his head contritely and stepped aside. Fool, how stupid am I? They also wanted to poison you, Uncle. I heard Aunt Vanessa and Nasser. Uncle Sylvester talking about it today, Martin said with courage. Mr. Oswald shuddered and looked at Sylvester with a burning gaze. So what do you say, Sylvester? The truth is spoken from the mouth of a babe, isn't it? I wondered why Veronica's brakes had suddenly failed. It's a new car, fresh from the showroom. What did I ever do to you? Didn't I pay you enough? That's what the janitor told me this morning. He says Sylvester was hanging around Veronica's car the day of the accident for some reason. What do you say? He wasn't. Sylvester got caught. He'd already realized he'd lost out to an 8-year-old who'd uncovered the devious scheme in no time. In fact, Vanessa was Sylvester's paternal half-sister and had known him from a young age. Despite the fact that they were not particularly friendly towards each other, this did not prevent them from creating a fraudulent community in which each had a role to play. To please Sylvester, Brittany agreed to persuade her son to play the role of Vanessa's son, with the intention of trapping the unsuspecting Mr. Oswald. Martin understood that his mother was dragging him into something bad, but for the time being he tolerated everything in silence. And when he realized what the conspirators were plotting, he picked up his mother's phone and found his father's number in it, who had stayed in the village. As Jason cradled his son in his arms, he mentally swore to himself that he would never be parted from him again. And since Sylvester's plan had failed, the trio left the town registry office for the police station. Mr. Oswald, on the other hand, approached little Martin and gave him his hand like an adult. Thanks, kid. If it hadn't been for you, I never would have recognized the deception. Martin gently shook the businessman's strong palm and pressed himself against his father. What a good son you have. If it hadn't been for him, I'd be in a mess I can't even imagine, Mr. Oswald added. Jason nodded, looked lovingly at Martin. This is Jason. He's the reason I was alive last night. He's also my fiancé, Veronica said, coming to her father's side. So Mr. Oswald had a satisfied smile on his face. That's a good thing, daughter. I approve of your choice. A worthy man and a son like his father. Maybe if God didn't give me a son, he'll give me a grandson. Jason drew in his breath to say that it was all a hoax when Veronica playfully covered his lips with her palm. Jason had been transformed from a fake fiancé to Veronica's lawfully wedded husband, whose life had changed immediately after the terrible accident at the city bridge. Well, we didn't get a wedding today. I suggest that everyone move to the restaurant and celebrate the engagement of my daughter Veronica and future son-in-law Jason, Mr. Oswald, having recovered from the initial shock, exclaimed, which immediately earned him a standing ovation from the friends, colleagues, and relatives in the wedding. And in 10 minutes, the excited company had already moved into their cars and headed for the best establishment in town, rented on the money of the failed culprit of the celebration. Jason remembered that night in particular. He danced a lot, had fun, and chatted with his son, whom he hadn't seen for 3 years. The next day, Jason went with Martin and Veronica to the hospital to see Mrs. Jennifer, whom he had promised to help. When Jason and his family arrived at the door, the kindly grandmother cried and hugged them one by one. "You look just like your daddy, boy." "That's exactly how I remember him," Mrs. Jennifer said with a smile, ruffling the boy's head. Jason later insisted that his favorite carer live with them and never regretted it. Sylvester got a real life sentence for the attempted murder of Veronica. Vanessa and Brittany got suspended sentences. Brittany was deprived of her parental rights because for all these 3 years she thought only about herself and did not care about her son. Jason, with the support of his father-in-law, connected his life with farming, buying the latest equipment, which he had never dreamed of before. And after a while, the former tractor driver realized another dream, getting rid of the scar on his cheek with the help of plastic surgery. Now Jason is no longer embarrassed by his appearance and is happy to pose for family photos on which the rounded tummy of his wife is very well visible. A millionaire widower hired an orphaned orphan as a carer for his daughter, and once home early P4. Amanda was experiencing the very real state of dread of a clean slate, even though she was neither a writer nor a journalist. Tomorrow she was starting a new life and a new job with accommodation. The employer is a wealthy, powerful businessman who clearly doesn't know his capital account. Without further ado, he made his conditions to her over the phone. "I need a carer with a degree in psychotherapy to be near my daughter 24 hours a day. I have a comfortable country house with excellent living conditions. You will be completely comfortable, but for the 3 months of your probationary period, you will not get a single day off. A generous salary will compensate you for this temporary inconvenience." And the man, who called himself Carl, quoted her fee so much that Amanda's legs gave out. Her monthly income would be the equivalent of her hospital salary for the year with all bonuses and fringe benefits. They agreed that she would start her duties in 3 days. During this time, she would gather all the personal belongings she needed and select the necessary medical devices for the patient's sessions. She will then be authorized to make a list of anything else she may need in her work. A car will pick you up at your front door at 0808 00 hours sharp. The driver's name is Andrew. Send me your home address to this number. Carl pronounced the words sharply and clearly as if he were minting coins. Amanda even thought that every minute of this man apparently is worth both silver and gold. Too businesslike. But it even appealed to her. She didn't respect the sourness and gruel in his speeches. She judged people by their actions, not by their sweet-voiced promises. She knew in her 26 years that time puts everything in its place and stigmatizes characters. Who's worth what? Here she is, Amanda herself, a psychotherapist with a red diploma, the beauty and pride of the faculty, the hope of the department. At school, all lightweight and character girlfriends on discos and bars and high school fluttered. She crammed. A place in the medical university on the budget partially guaranteed only a gold medal. The support should have been passed on excellent final exams. There was no money for serious education in the family of Max, a plumber, and his wife Idoshka, who worked in a bakery as a saleswoman. No, her parents were not some marginalized individuals. Father even drank, only on holidays, did not complain of this bad habit, and with men colleagues every paycheck did not cheat. He came from a remote, abandoned village and ended up in the city when clever businessmen bought out all the agriculture in his small homeland for the farming kingdom. A kind of holding there now appeared with dairy and meat processing plant of a new format, with technological lines of the most innovative kind. Max was called to work there, but he held a grudge against the new owners, that they almost uprooted the pogost on the outskirts. where his and his wife Ida's parents were buried, that the village was torn down to nothing, turned into ashes, ruins, an archaeological monument of their former life. Inwardly, he knew it was just as well. The population in their village was finally getting drunk. There was no work. Everyone was leaving for the city in droves. Only he and Ida held on to their hut and 10 acres of land, but then they gave up too. Amandochka was 14 years old at that time. That's how she became a city girl. With the proceeds from the sale of land and house, they bought a 2-room flat in the city. The 5-story red brick building was strong. It would stand for a long time. Max was taken to the factory with open arms. The salary was small, but their family made ends meet. Ida quickly made friends with the women neighbors. They told her there was room in the bakery. The old saleswoman had just taken a well-deserved holiday. Working Ida was well received, not offended. Happiness ended overnight. Max came to pick up his wife from the bakery in an old car. Clumsy bread van, in the courtyard, clumsily turned around, crushed under himself a kopeck, not even immediately noticing what happened fate. The driver and passenger died on the spot. Amanda's urban life began with orphanhood. Amanda used to rush to school like a prodigy. Always loved to learn, books about relationships between people so in general swallowed overnight. So she was interested in who and how of the heroes will act when he tail-nailed, in a stalemate plunged into a stalemate with all the guts, in front of the choice put. In the orphanage, where she got after the tragedy, at first snickered, but then sublimated on the study, not to think, not to remember untimely departed loved ones. 6 months later, her foster parents took her under guardianship, but warm, cordial relations with them were not born. She moved to them in 2 rooms and a communal room, still not an orphanage, where everyone dreamed of a family and parents even at a young age, but she dreamed of growing up and living alone. Naive, touching young lady Amanda tried to assess the behavior of people, to guess who and how they would show themselves, taking into account their temperament and character, a kind of homegrown psychologist. And even more, she liked to think about the fact that a person can be broken, to change the line of his behavior, to convince. In the 10th grade, Amanda disappeared in the scientific library, where she read Freud, Jung, Bandura, Halperin, Beck, Bechterew. Her classmates did not know the names of such names, and she melted and molted from her new discoveries. Her gold medal at school suffered, sitting days and nights on her heels over textbooks. Her merits did not include gifts, offerings to teachers there was no one to pay. Talented student high marks were given sincerely and generously. Her peers did not persecute the crazy girl. They had long since given up on her eccentricities, although there were good reasons to pay more attention to her. Amanda was ravishingly beautiful, possessing that very feminine magic when men turn into slaves, admirers, barely having seen such a rare specimen of external perfection. Her hair, the color of ripe wheat, fell in waves down her smooth back. Green eyes with dark pupils beckoned to drown in their depths. Lush forms gave birth to a halo of sensuality. Graceful wrists and ankles hinted at blue blood, charm, aristocratism, refinement. Nature had not rested on her appearance. Only Amanda herself did not seem to notice any of this, persistently gnawed the granite of science and ignored the languid glances of representatives of the stronger sex of all ages. After receiving a certificate of secondary education, orphan, and even a medalist in the medical university, took pity. Dramatic life at the girl, you can make an exception, on the budget place to look for a place. She passed the entrance exam on excellent without tutors and material investments. She returned to her flat, left after the death of her parents. Private property, nothing can be done or taken away. She dressed unfashionably, modestly. Not as a garden scarecrow, of course, adhered to strict classics, a little leveling her natural charm. She didn't notice men around her from the word at all. She was so keen on Mrs. Psychology. But one day she fell for a seasoned catcher. Mason was also good-looking, ironic, daring, and unpredictable with this Amanda, and managed to captivate. She fell head over heels in love. She responded enthusiastically to the offer to drop by for a glass of wine, knowing perfectly well what would follow. Except the guy had a nasty little soul. Amanda laid in bed on a bet with a guy from the majors who was courting the girl, but got a turnaround, told a fellow student. Son, don't sit on the crate. I'll take this girl down without a hitch. He grinned, and then you'll follow the beaten track. Got it, rookie. Don't teach a scientist, the golden child of an important daddy. If you get her to be easy for me, I'll slip you 100 grand. So Mason worked his arse off. Amanda figured out the catch the next time they met after their wild night. Her hot beau looked like an ice cube. She didn't faint, she wrote off her fascination with the smarmy Mason as hormones. Only the fee to the self-confident, handsome man did not get. Amanda made far-reaching conclusions for herself, and now she wouldn't let male representatives within a kilometer of her. Coffee with cakes in the nearest cafe between couples was always welcome. Going to the cinema for the premiere as a group. Why not? The rest of the attempts in her address, reminiscent of courtship, suppressed at the root. Around the crowd of those wishing only hoped in vain, all awaited a complete refusal. Trouble for the young doctor, after completing the theoretical course of classes, did not end there. Place in residency received deservedly, in a prestigious psychotherapeutic hospital. There greedily caught every word of her new idol, the head of the Department of Rehabilitation after serious cognitive disorders. He taught the resident a lot, eagerly listening to his recommendations. He handled difficult patients, then helped her with a referral to another prestigious place. And there the persecution from the male community continued. The first swallow, or rather a persistent eagle guest, was one of the doctors with professional weight in the clinic. He did not go round and round. He called the young specialist to his office. We need to have dinner with you today to discuss the prospects of your work in our institution. Warn me at home that you won't come for the night. He told her directly, without any offense, straight to the forehead, that her career was only through his bed. She abruptly and without regret refused the invitation, for which she soon paid the price. It turned out that before her appearance in this institution with sedatives under strict control, everything was clear. Then she showed up, and expensive pills started going missing in packs. Her involvement or non-involvement in the thefts was not investigated. They quickly pointed at the door, threatening proceedings with a subsequent wolf ticket and blacklisting in the profession. The next incident occurred at the specialized ambulance station where she got a job. The brigades had a narrow focus: to take them out of a hangover, to deal with aggressive behavior that led to a fight, injury to loved ones, and a state of temporary effect. Their patients were people on the brink, balancing between the diagnosis of incompetent and incapacitated, living between bouts of mental illness and remission. Why weren't they isolated from society? There were plenty of reasons. Some where relatives ransomed the blood babies, and some where the border guards themselves were able to prey with the help of money and connections from suspicions of abnormality. Amanda had never realized there were such medical services in their city. She'd been brought here by the same call from a faculty member who'd patronized her during her residency. The trips to the inadequates, as her team called them, were over in a month. That time she was on the same team as the head of their office. He also sometimes took part in psychological raids, saying that he hadn't been to the circus for a long time and wanted to have fun. Amanda was disgusted by his cynicism, but had no choice. After a fairly quiet shift, the supervisor volunteered to give her a lift home. The institution was located outside the city. The first bus was still an hour away. Everyone was tired after a sleepless night. On her own head, the young woman agreed. But the chief didn't go to the city, but drove her to the nearest woods. "Bolly, I don't like ceremonies." He breathed in her face with his breath. He wasn't afraid of anything. When already in the car, he drank half of a flat glass flask of cognac. Amanda immediately wanted to leave the car, but he only laughed. "I have half of the city receive certificates of sanity in the right cases. I am not afraid of neither the authorities nor the traffic police." She herself could not explain later where the strength came from to slap him hard. The man's head jerked. He looked at his colleague in surprise. "Not cooperative, you say? Well, go fish out of here the field to the city 11 kilometers. While you walk, you will air your brains in the cold. There's no place in my team for a naughty girl. Ask any of our female employees, now get out." Amanda didn't ask anyone. The next shift, she wrote a letter of resignation, and that was that. Out of practice again, out of work again. She stayed home for a month and a half. None of the clinics did not want to take her even to the place of a nurse. Rumors of her unreliability filled the medical world, and it was up to everyone to interpret them. Amanda's psychotherapist, advanced in matters of different types of aggression, was well aware of such a Western phenomenon as harassment, but the woman had never imagined that she herself would become its victim. She did not yet know how the owner of a bright female beauty to put up barriers against vile molestations, rudely violating her personal space. This was something she would have to think hard about in the future. A call from Carl the day before had interrupted a long string of bad luck. She wouldn't just go for the job, she'd crawl into it if she had to. Why was she so scared and excited at the same time? She couldn't explain it herself. "What will the coming day bring me?" she hummed for some reason in a bass voice, and then asked further, "Will I fall pierced by an arrow?" Then she would laugh loudly to drive the nasty fear further inwards. The job was ambiguous. A carer for a girl with a fatal blood disorder and Asperger's. The notorious syndrome was unfamiliar to ordinary people, far removed from medical terms. In a nutshell, its effect on patients could be characterized as inability, impossibility, or inclination to communicate with the outside world. Existence in their own narrow world into which strangers were rarely allowed. In society, such people are called autistic. The anamnesis of Amanda's future ward was aggravated by a serious blood disease, autoimmune in nature. Inside the unfortunate victim, some cells kept proving to others that they were the main ones, destroying the body tissues caught on the warpath. The patient's condition was now rated medium severity. Protracted remission gave her father a chance to be near his favorite girl longer. But how long the insidious disease will behave decently knew, in all probability, only the Almighty in heaven. The doctors only parted their hands. "Carl, we are doing everything we can, but only a miracle can help the girl. You and I live in the real world, with its cruel laws of Mother Nature, ruling over all living beings on the planet." "I've heard it all 1,000 times, replied the inconsolable father. "What's your advice? How can I brighten her life, if she does not react to anything unconcerned, inactive, quiet, and silent? I've never seen if she can smile. 16 years of constant uncertainty. It can drive you crazy." The renowned autism spectrum disorder specialist sitting in the chair across from Carl thought for a few seconds, then said, "I have one doctor with a not-so-successful professional path, doesn't get along for long in any treatment facility, and I can't get from her the reasons for these constant fiascos. She was one of the most intelligent students on my course, gave great hopes, burning desire to benefit disadvantaged people, followed all the methods and innovations in our field, and in clinics deflated like a balloon. Unfortunately, I cannot patronize every brilliant student of mine. Made a couple of patronages for her, but it didn't work out. She and I recently met by chance at a cake shop where I was buying a cake for my wife's birthday. Exchanged contacts in case I had information again about vacancies somewhere in our sponsored hospitals. Invite this girl, she did her residency at my hospital, and I can vouch for her almost as much as I can." Carl weighed the pros and cons and decided that he had nothing to lose. The old carers couldn't cope with Elizabeth. So maybe this young girl could do something? There were quite a few residents in his large house. His favorite cook, Vanessa, who had been with him for 30 years, her son Ashley, the gardener and Vanessa's au pair, a maid with the exotic name of Gabriella. There's room for the unknown Amanda, with 4 guest rooms empty. Baby, as he called the maid to himself. I'll have to give her the order to do it. The ice of the experiment that would turn their lives around had broken. Amanda decided to start the radical changes in her life with her appearance. She needed to create a new working image that would hide her natural beauty as much as possible. She didn't want this heavenly gift, which she thought was unnecessary and undeserved, to interfere with her work again. The young woman's not-so-extensive wardrobe consisted of loose trousers, baggy skirts in dark colors, oversized jumpers, blouses, low-cut shoes, and boots. A couple of funny pajamas with Chibarashka and Gina and bunnies on the lawn on the prints. Amanda liked lingerie, lace, and silk, so no one would see it under her loose clothes. Her hair was a bit of a mess. They did not want to be braided into braids, which were destined to form a curl on her head. The image was completed by glasses with neutral glasses without diopters. She had bought them for a masquerade party at the university a long time ago. Now they came in handy again. Satisfied with the fitting, Amanda put her camouflage ammunition into a large bag and went to collect her specialized books with much more pleasure. While her patient was resting, she would read everything about autism in more detail. You don't just start treatment from scratch. You need a sober, rational approach to everything. At 08:00 this morning, as promised by Carl, Amanda's doorbell rang with a smiling guy. "Hi, I'm Andrew. Let me take your things to the car. The chief has asked you to check everything thoroughly for any forgotten items. You won't be able to leave for 3 months." Amanda felt so warm and relaxed by his words. She thought we'd work together. I'll do everything I can to make it work. The journey to her new home took just over 3 hours without traffic. The train station is 2 kilometers away. As if Andrew had read her mute question. There are 6 cars in the garage, 2 drivers. Anything that needs to be bought and brought in, you'll leave it to me. Amanda looked curiously around the majestic, but very pretty house of gentle sandy color with brown original elements of decor on the facade, balconies, a large terrace. The building stood surrounded by parkland, with a large outdoor swimming pool visible in the distance, now covered with some kind of protective material. The smooth alleys were lined with neat, clean tiles, a scattering of coniferous trees. One of the paths was framed with birch trees. The rose garden was wrapped in a film. On the other side of the house there are some outbuildings resembling small greenhouses. Everywhere boxwood shrubbery, green even in this late autumn, some exotic, with thick emerald-colored leaves. There's a whole guard lined up on the porch. "Welcome to our home." These are the words of a tall, formidable woman with a mop of bright red hair. "My name is Vanessa. I'm the housekeeper, like Carlson's freaking Bach, and I'm also the cook." The woman smiled a wide, kind smile and held out a large, soft, warm palm to Amanda. "This fellow with the rake is my son Ashley. He's a bit of a handyman out of boredom, but his favorite is the garden. It's his domain," Aunt Vanessa continued. "Have you met Andrew? The other driver's name is William. The only one left is our maid Gabriela. Her mom's Spanish. That's where the name came from." Amanda was stared at with 2 large brown eyes by a young lady with a form that was overemphasized by her work clothes. Amanda only had time to think when a tall, elderly man with a noble appearance appeared on the doorstep. She would have addressed him as Your Majesty, or at least Your Grace or Your Lordship before. Gray, piercing eyes, a short hedgehog of gray hair, regal posture, broad shoulders, pleasant timbre of voice. "Amanda, I am Carl. Gabriela will show you to your room and give you a tour of the house and courtyard. Make yourself comfortable. Our Vanessa will bring the meal schedule to your attention. I expect you in my office in 2 hours for a chat. If it satisfies me, I'll introduce you to my daughter Elizabeth." He turned and disappeared into the house. Ashley picked up Amanda's luggage. Gabriela made an inviting gesture to follow her, and only Vanessa smiled reassuringly at her. "We have lunch at 2 p.m. Late arrivals will not be tolerated by the host. Then we'll get to know each other better. Now you have more important things to do without me." Amanda followed Gabriela through the house and hardly listened to the maid's peaceful mutterings. She was impressed by her room, with its separate bathroom and toilet, its huge windows overlooking the garden, its elegant yet homely atmosphere. She did not know yet how her life in this house would turn out, but she was already eager to make herself useful in it. Amanda's relationship with her foster parents was normal, but whether it was modern trends that influenced them, or whether her interests were very different from those of the older generation. They rarely saw each other. Communication was reduced to routine phone calls like, "Daughter, how are you? Is everything all right? Everything is fine with us too." The dialogue usually ended or was reduced to discussing another talk show on TV or gossip about the neighbors in the yard. It was stifling for Amanda in such a boring framework. To see each other was for her birthday, to drop by with presents before New Year's Eve, but to tell her father and mother how difficult and lonely it was for her in this world of people was out of the question. She's an adult, independent, a cut-off piece. She had not formed with her guardians that special soulful closeness, when one for all and all for one. The older generation did not understand her choice of profession, but moving to a flat, leaving on her own approved. Adopted daughter stopped chasing them for the empty time spent near the TV in the arms of fried seeds, without attempts to develop intelligence. Different blood, different destinies, on different paths rushing. This large, beautiful dwelling Amanda felt in her gut some kind of unity between the household. She had not been here for half an hour yet, and she already wanted to stay for a long time. Tired of the long monologue, Gabriella led her to the door of Carl's study at the end of her tour of the building and garden and said, "I don't like ceremonies and antimonies. We'll be rubbing our sides against each other all day long. Don't barge in on your master. Knock first. He doesn't take kindly to familiarity." Amanda nodded, agreeing to the you and thanking her for the tips. Gabriella left, swaying her hips gently, and the therapist thought to herself, "There's a reason this nymph is trying so hard. Probably there is an object of her attention in the house, for the sake of which she is constantly in a state of combat readiness to beckon, to envelope with charms, to conquer the heart. Does she have her eye on the master? It's a good thing I took care of my modest appearance beforehand. I will not be so conspicuous to the domestic public as Gabriella deliberately does. They'll have to deal with that themselves. I have other tasks." Amanda knocked firmly on the study door and entered after a shout from her host. Yes, come in, I'm in my office." The office, though still an inexperienced practitioner, but a very strong theorist, liked it at first sight. Furniture made of noble wood, endless shelves with books, elegant statuettes, excellent landscapes and stylish frames on the walls. A desk with a large desktop computer, a music center with speakers in a corner, a separate cabinet with CDs. She didn't know Carl at all yet, but this office seemed to shout out loud, "My owner is far from stupid, well-read and educated, intelligent and successful." Carl himself invited her to sit in the soft armchair by the coffee table, not telling her her subordinate place in the room, seating her at the desk opposite him. Ringing the bell, he summoned Gabriella. "Make us a couple of cups of coffee, please, or would you prefer juice or tea?" Amanda gratefully agreed to the coffee. She had been so nervous this morning that she hadn't even had breakfast at home, and now she was afraid that her traitorous stomach would give her away, rumbling loudly at the worst possible moment. Lucky for her, along with coffee, Gabriella had brought a vase of walnut biscuits, a box of chocolates, and a jug of cream. Amanda pounced on the treats like a hungry wolf, but she saw no judgment in Carl's eyes. He liked sincerity and directness in people, even smiled. "We're not welcoming you well. Your first day on the road. They didn't even offer you tea." Amanda tried to say with a full mouth that everything was fine, then smiled helplessly back, wiped the crumbs off her lips, and carefully finished the rest of the biscuits. "You'll have to forgive me. I was nervous, so I went for the sweets. Thanks for the coffee. Let's get back to business." Carl would never admit to his partners or to this young woman that he likes to do his inspections the old-fashioned way. It was an approach he had borrowed from his father, a simple farmer who had spent his life cultivating the land and growing cereal crops. Now his father, unfortunately, was no longer able to work. 5 years ago, Carl had bought a house in the neighboring village where his parents were now living. The older generation flatly refused to move into Carl's mansion, arguing that the land in their vegetable garden was much closer and more interesting to them than the park landscapes of their son's estate. Having a kind-hearted housekeeper, the son stopped persuading them to live together. Now they only went to visit each other and to family holidays. But he remembered his father's instruction that any hired laborer should first be fed heartily, see how he copes with the meal, and then draw conclusions. If a person eats sincerely, without greediness and false shyness, he will be good, but if he tells that he is not hungry, takes only a couple of crumbs from the table for decency, he will work so sluggishly. Any qualified recruiter would die with laughter from such a method of personnel selection, but Carl had long ago learnt from his own experience that the method works without fail. After handing Gabriella a tray with empty cups, Amanda's boss started the conversation. "Your candidacy was recommended to me by a professor who sometimes counsels my daughter. Before you begin your duties, I would like to briefly tell you our backstory. Not as a stranger to me yet, but as a therapist. Elizabeth, my wife, and I have a late baby. My spouse passed away a week after she was born. Heart failure. I have an older son, Harry. He lives and works in Europe, in our branch in Prague, and comes here occasionally. Harry was born when my wife and I were very young. Now he is 33 years old. Our student marriage, made by great mutual love, turned out to be very strong. We live soul to soul, and only one thing upset my chosen one. After the birth of Harry, a series of miscarriages followed. My wife dreamed of a second child, a girl. Even the name of her beforehand in honor of her mother, to whom my wife was infinitely attached. At the age of 44, my wife got pregnant once again. Was infinitely happy, but the doctors grabbed their heads. Even the usual examination, which all expectant mothers undergo, revealed a serious arrhythmia. The heart could not cope with the double load. Problems with the work of blood vessels began. Doctors feared that the baby was not getting enough of the nutrients it needed. My wife, almost all the time lying in the clinic, only looked at me pleadingly and asked, "Don't let the doctors terminate this pregnancy. I will take care, fulfill all their appointments. I have to carry this baby to term." Her zeal increased even more after the ultrasound showed that she was carrying a girl. The wife became finally obsessed with the idea that it was heaven that finally took pity on us and was giving us this last chance. My wife bravely endured 9 months of agonizing waiting and an endless series of procedures and injections and surgical intervention in the form of a cesarean section. The neonatologist's verdict was a blow to her. They immediately began to suspect some abnormalities in the girl. A detailed examination showed that she inherited an extremely rare genetic blood disease, transmitted through the female line. People with it do not live long, 10 to 15 years at most. The news broke the wife, shattered everything in her already sick heart. Arrhythmia attacks began to recur with wicked persistence. She never returned home from the hospital. Elizabeth was discharged after 2 months of scrupulous observation. At first I was desperate, resentful of the little girl for taking away the woman I loved and leaving me alone in the world. Harry was 17 at that time. I am still amazed that he was a wise adult even then, convinced me that everything was destined by fate, that he too had lost his mom. But it was her life, her dream, and her choice. You won't believe it, but it was he who, together with the nanny, looked after the baby, quickly learned to change her nappies, and feed her specialized formula. The second blow was that soon doctors noticed that Elizabeth was different, not like other children. Her genetic disorder had not yet manifested itself in any way. But she drove us crazy by the fact that she did not react to our presence at 6 months, at 1 year and then. Imagine the picture. The child eats, sleeps, but does not react to us, to a lot of colorful toys around him. The face is like a frozen mask. No vivid facial expressions, no gestures. As you sit or lay down in such a position and will freeze. Sometimes for quite a long time. The girl turned out to be pretty, even pretty. Big-eyed, curls of blonde hair, chubby arms and legs, but she behaved like a puppet, like an artificial doll. After a while, she was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome or autism. Doctors assured her that this type of autism spectrum disorder boded well for her prospects. Body functions would be partially developed, but not fully developed. I took Elizabeth to Europe. There the doctors were able to perform almost a miracle. They removed the sleep disorder, adapted her eating to the right regime, and taught her to react at least a little to what was going on. I came back from Germany almost happy. Elizabeth began to recognize her family, babbled something in a language we didn't know, sometimes tried to express something with gestures, but she still hadn't learned to smile. On the street, she turned round at the noise during walks, on a trip to the Black Sea, and pushed her legs up when Harry and I tried to bathe her in it. A little later, I sent Harry to study in the UK, and as if as a reward for my troubles, my business grew and grew like on yeast, bringing me more and more income. We built this house together with my wife. It was her idea to live away from the hustle and bustle of the city, in the peaceful countryside. The man briefly interrupted his narrative. It was obvious that the story stirred up old memories in him. He looked at his watch and then looked up a little. There are only 15 minutes left till lunch. The rest you will learn in the process of work. I'll just add the main thing, the autoimmune disease, like a hungry hydra on the hunt, reared its head sharply when Elizabeth entered puberty. Everything was always delayed compared to her peers. So it happened about 2 years ago, at her 14. The former merits of the medical profession began to fade quickly. It seemed that the destruction of cell tissue by her own internal aggressors was causing her brain activity to go to sleep. The few dozen words that she had previously spoken cheerfully were forgotten. She is once again indifferent to what is going on around her. Happy to walk with Vanessa outdoors. Even swimming in the pool with Ashley's help, the girl has forgotten all those skills. More and more often she won't let herself get out of bed. Now moves only in a wheelchair, eats almost nothing, loses weight. I realize, Amanda, that you're not a miracle worker or a god. The doctors have already told me that the girl has no more than a year to live. The deterioration of her fragile body is progressing. For myself, I have labeled your tasks as facilitating her departure to the next world. I know it's impossible, but I still dream of her smiling when she looks at our park, our home, the sky, and the sun. I guess I want too much from you. Amanda was in shock. No, not at the task set before her. Here she would do everything she could, apply all her knowledge. There was such pain and despair in the man's eyes. He spoke so courageously about his daughter's imminent departure from this world that the visiting therapist's blood ran cold. So much for the high fence, the rich house, in the walls of which for so many years trouble has lived at ease, despite the pleasant faces of the people who built it. The lunch was gorgeous. Vanessa cooked so deliciously that Amanda didn't even notice that she ate all of it. She reached for some very unusual salad, and several people answered her mute question about where Elizabeth was. Elizabeth is having lunch in her room, said Carl. We'll go to meet her after dinner. I've already made her favorite meatballs and mashed potatoes, Vanessa added. And I picked a bunch of brightly colored Septembers behind the house. I think Elizabeth is excited by their sharp autumn scent. Only Gaby, Elizabeth's father, had called the maid that once in a conversation in the study, and Amanda had picked up the nickname mentally, so shorter and much simpler, ate, staring intently at her plate. She seemed to care the least, if at all, about Elizabeth's plight. We'll have to keep an eye on this smashing person, Amanda decided to herself. She's prepared my room perfectly, no complaints. But did she make any insinuations about her patient? In dealing with an autistic patient, all means are good, and all little things can be global. After these words, everyone at the table was again distracted by sweet cakes and compote. Amanda thought to herself through her grief, dreams, and thoughts. It's good here they have a soul. The servants dine at the same table with the master. Everyone is praying for the girl as best they can, all trying to brighten her life. Her thoughts were interrupted by Carl's voice. Amanda, are you ready to see your patient? The woman replied enthusiastically that she was looking forward to it, and she was not the least bit wrong. The curtains were drawn in Elizabeth's room. It was dark, and there was a kind of gloom and despair. Amanda immediately noted to herself that this had to change. It was understandable. A seriously ill person lived here, but it was not worth emphasizing it with decorations. The girl did not react to their appearance. At that moment, Vanessa brought a tray with Amanda's favorite dishes. The therapist decided not to put her work on hold. Carl, Vanessa, let me feed Elizabeth, and we'll have a chat. Leave us alone. Elizabeth is your new doctor, Amanda. She'll be with you almost non-stop. You don't mind if we leave you two alone, do you? Again, there was no visible reaction. The girl obediently opened her mouth at the sight of food, chewing and swallowing like a puppet. But Amanda began her monologue. I'm not a doctor or a carer for you, Elizabeth. I prefer the status of friend. I'll be there for you of my own free will, even though I'm an employee. I'll tell you the truth, I'd stay with you for free, as long as I like it very much. Your wonderful house, the place, the people, you. Tomorrow you and I are going to turn your room upside down. I don't think it will be bad for your health. For a split second, Amanda thought there was a flicker of something in the girl's eyes, some glimmer of reaction, but it all went out again very quickly, and it could have been the insidious play of light and shadow in the room at all. The doctor, under a shower, decided to think about it in her room later, but in the meantime she dressed her ward in warm clothes and took her in her pram to the courtyard to breathe the strong air of golden autumn. From that moment on, the days in the house followed a long-established pattern. And in the morning, Amanda and Elizabeth had breakfast together in the girls' room. Then there were the inevitable drips and injections to combat the manifestations of genetic malfunctions. The obligatory 2-hour walk in the garden, where Ashley always lovingly tended the plants. Lunch in the great hall. At this meal, Amanda would spend time with the household and then feed Elizabeth. The patient's therapeutic sleep, a new batch of medication dripping steadily through the IV for a couple of hours at a time. Dinner, now in the presence of Carl, who on weekdays was always at work, and in the evenings and weekends worked hard at home in his office. Exhausted by the endless procedures, the patient fell into a deep sleep as early as 10 o'clock in the evening. Amanda studied the works of colleagues related to autism again and again. There were no changes in terms of closer contact with her ward, neither for the worse nor for the better. The girl's condition remained stable. Amanda talked to Elizabeth about everything, told her about the plot of her favorite fiction books, read her poems, showed her reproductions of paintings from a large, colorful album. Or rather, the word talking is not appropriate here at all. The doctor conducted her eternal monologue, and the girl listened to it indifferently. The other day, already beginning to despair, a little doctor found in one of the foreign articles information that to level the manifestations of isolation with autism for patients can be a good help to communicate with the animal world. For some reason, there were no pets in Carl's house. After a general meeting of all the residents of the mansion, it was decided to get a puppy of a large dog. Most of all, for some reason, everyone liked a Canadian Newfoundland. 2 days later, Andrew brought a shaggy black treasure with stormy eyes from a kennel breeding this particular breed. He was irresistible. It is commonly believed that our lesser brothers have no intelligence. What told Tim, then, that the full name Timothy, and not some Bax or Lord, was so much nicer, that he was meant for Elizabeth. Finding himself in her room as a guest, the place had long since been on Amanda's errand, a more racy setting with lots of brightly colored elements. Tim headed straight for the girl and rubbed his wet nose into her palm. The doctor was sure there was a flicker of reaction in Elizabeth's eyes, lightning fast, but she had no doubt, bright and positive. For the first time, Amanda felt they were on the right track. By New Year's Eve and Christmas, everyone in the house was expecting Harry from Prague. Amanda didn't know the young man. She only remembered Vanessa's words. He's golden. Elizabeth transforms when her big brother arrives. She can't smile, but here it's like her face lights up. Gabriella, who was present during their conversation, added, "And what a handsome man Harry is. Respectable, decent, wise, but at the same time outwardly a typical example of Hollywood hero lover. 2 characters in one person, it's so intriguing." Vanessa immediately echoed her words. "Oof, Gabriella, go change Elizabeth's bedclothes, while she and Amanda are out for a walk. You've got Cupid's days on your mind, you're not the right girl. Roll your lips." Gaby, wiggling her hips as usual, walked away, and the cook gave her a shrug and said to Amanda, "The girl goes completely off the rails when the owner's son flies home from Europe, making eyes at him, and he looks at her like she's nothing. He had a bride, but she cheated on her husband while he was earning money in the Czech Republic. They ran away, although the foolish young lady was begging us, shedding tears, just that the hair on her head did not tear in despair that she missed a rich party. It didn't help. Harry couldn't trust her at all, couldn't forgive her for seeing another man at the same time." Sighing sorrowfully, Vanessa suddenly suggested, "Come to my room tonight and we'll have a tea party. I'll tell you my story, how Carl saved me from trouble, and why I've since nicknamed him the Angel of Goodness." On the walk, Amanda and Ashley discussed raising a new pet. It wasn't right for a pedigree dog to go peer shucking in the yard. The gardener had told her he'd always wanted a dog. He patiently put up with Tim's antics, even forgave him for ramming a rose bush wrapped in cling film into the yard on the run. Amanda again thought that Elizabeth, sitting in the wheelchair, made some movement in the direction of the mischievous Newfoundlander, but she was in no hurry to express her assumptions aloud. We must watch and watch and watch again and again. There it would be seen. After supper, when she was satisfied that Elizabeth had fallen into a restful sleep, she closed her door firmly and knocked on the next door. "Come in," I've been waiting. I've made us some green tea with molasses and gooseberry jam and nuts. Now we'll have a feast. Oksana had been in the chef's room only briefly before, but now she could examine the room in more detail. The same elegance and home coziness, spiced with personal things dear to her heart. There were many framed photographs on the wall, Carl and his wife still very young, Elizabeth in various angles, Ashley in the garden, then near the gazebo, then by the pool, a handsome young man on horseback. That's our Harry. A handsome man. Gabriella doesn't mince words. God grant him personal happiness. He's like his father in business. He should have children of his own, and he's still traveling abroad. I realize he's no monk, but all these windy girlfriends aren't what he needs for marriage. He'll make a marvelous father. He loves Elizabeth. Vanessa ate another spoonful of clear amber and emerald gooseberry jam and began her tale. After high school 35 years ago, I trained as a food technologist. Not just any culinary school in New York City. I dreamed of a career as a chef. The kind that would get me Michelin stars for the art of cooking. It didn't work out. The reason for everything was my uncluttered appearance. Height under 1 meter 90 centimeters, size 42 feet, fullness, bright copper hair, angular movements, lack of taste in the choice of wardrobe. Of course, chefs are not chosen by their clothes, but representatives of the personnel service and all the cafes and restaurants where I tried to get a job after graduation refused me under any plausible pretext. In one prestigious restaurant, only the lady in personnel was honest. Our customers often invite the chef of the dish to the room if they like it. You cannot be a business card of our institution. You're only fit for a place in the circus buffet. I don't say this harshly because I'm cynical, not at all. I like to be honest with the people I hire. It's better that way than looking away shamefacedly and keeping a kook in my pocket. And yet my traveling in agony was one day crowned with success. I was taken to a private cafe Tsarina Tamara with authentic Georgian cuisine. The owner is a small bald Georgian with hooked fingers and crooked legs. He then temporarily dispelled even the myth for me that Caucasian men are always endowed with a sharp oriental beauty. Curly-haired, black-eyed, daring, this man said without a word of criticism. I have a wife who is ill in a female way. She can't sleep with me, and I am a man. I need to save my physiology. You'll work in the kitchen and visit me a couple of times a week. If you do well, I'll make you head chef, and then maybe chief. I, from his words at first in a precipitate fell out, said that I would think about it, and then I calculated in the Institute 6 years at the correspondence department. Before that 2 years as an assistant cook in the canteen. I am not today, so tomorrow 26 years old will be. And I'm still wearing girls. There's no cue for my red-headed soul. No one even looked at me with that enveloping male gaze full of desire. Ever. Blushing and pale, 2 days later informed that I agreed to all the terms. The owner of Tsarina Tamara glared at me, invited me to the back room. There I learnt the basics of love between crates of vegetables, herbs, and boxes of vodka, which in decanters was later passed off as cha-cha. It's a shame, come on. Big physiological love on a quick hand honestly lasted between me and the chief for 1.5 years. And then I got pregnant. Having learnt the news, my lover was not ceremonious, dismissed in no time. He kept bemoaning that I shouldn't talk, that his wife shouldn't know anything. He has 3 grown-up children, they'll see who he's staring at. The family will laugh. He paid me 3 months' salary in advance and washed his paternal hands of me. About the fact that the baby should be born, I informed him not immediately. All the time delayed, I felt that this news will not turn out well. With my general fullness, belly became noticeable only in the 6th or 7th month. Just before the usual official maternity leave, I found myself on the street. My rent ran out 2 weeks before Ashley was born. All I had was an aunt in a remote village. I can't even tell you how close we are. I'd never seen my father before. My mother drank herself to death when I was 20. She was homeless at first, and then she went missing. But I never doubted for a second that the baby would be. I'm alone in this world, and this will be my own blood. The landlady of my flat is not a kind-hearted person, but she took pity, waited until I gave birth and discharged from the maternity hospital. She gave me a month to do everything, and then she put up with it for free. and then her children came to live with her. They had nowhere to live, so she showed me the door. We went with a 1-month-old baby to grieve. We stayed a week in a shabby hotel, but my son was restless. The noise insulation in the building was shitty. Other guests began to complain that we did not let them sleep at night. We moved out to nowhere. I'm sitting at the intercity bus stop with my stuff and Ashley's bundle. I thought I'd go to the countryside, see if I could find an abandoned house. I had enough money in my purse for a week's existence. When an expensive dark Jeep pulled up next to the bus stop, I didn't even immediately realize that the driver was asking me what I had. I sat there in tears. Carl, and it was him. At that time, the house in these parts built a house, looking for a local specialized shop that recently erected on the highway. I gave him the address, why not, but he didn't leave it once. Later he told me that my eyes were like those of a beaten dog and there was so much desperation in them that he couldn't resist asking. "Woman, why are you sitting in the wind with a baby? I can give you a lift somewhere, even if it's in the other direction." I don't know how it happened, but I told him all my troubles in 2 words, as if I were in the wind. He chuckled and thought about it for a few minutes, then asked, "A professional cook, you say?" "I'm looking for such a specialist. I need to feed 2 teams of workers every day. We can provide you with a boxcar for accommodation." Of course, I didn't hesitate for a second. It was getting late, and the bus was delayed, so I was going to sleep in the field with Ashley, right on the dead grass. I gathered up my few belongings and climbed into the warmth of the car. There was no fear or apprehension. I was used to the work, and I loved my craft. Vanessa interrupted her long story and poured her and Amanda another cup of fragrant tea. She brought from the kitchen a dish of ruddy cakes left over from dinner and glanced briefly at Amanda. "Have I bored you with my tales yet, Doctor?" "Not at all, Vanessa. It's rare for anyone to talk to me so heartily, to confide their secrets to me. I am very grateful to you for this frankness." "Then I will continue," said the woman. Then everything was much more pleasant. Guy's workers met me as a mother starved on dry meat, and I with a move them borscht boiled on a brain bone, cooked cutlets, wheat porridge in a cast iron steamed with butter. When they brought to the table and compote, the foreman could not stand it. "You cook deliciously, Vanessa. We haven't seen such delicacies here for a long time. Therefore, guys, I will order the following. We have 15 people working here. It's hard to feed that many without a well-equipped kitchen. So we'll distribute the daily duty. Who of the men will help with wood for the stove? Who will carry water? Who will help the cook with other hard work? She's got a little boy in her arms. He needs to be fed and nursed. So have a conscience, brothers. Don't sit on this young woman's neck, and don't offend her in word or deed." That's how I found myself in our yard about 30 years ago when it was still under construction. Ashley is my native gold, having grown up here. After the construction was finished, I stayed in the house with the owners. Carl and his wife had Harry's little boy at the time. Oh, what a table I made for their housewarming party. The guests could only wonder where he'd found such a cook. There were various people in the house, high-ranking and with connections. Many times they tried to lure me to other houses. How could they do such a thing? An angel of goodness from heaven appeared to me one autumn evening at a bus stop, and I would betray him when others beckoned. Elizabeth was born to me, her nannies and carers, and Carl made me head of the house and promoted me to housekeeper. Everyone here has become dear to me. Even that empty Gabriella with her dreams of hunting Carl's son doesn't seem like an enemy. That's my story for you, Amanda. Maybe it will help you in your work. Amanda went to her room pensive. She used to trust the notion that the rich were stingy with their souls. In Carl's house, she saw a different world full of warmth, respect, and a willingness to help each other through the difficult realities of life. Her fervent conviction to do everything she could to make Elizabeth feel at least a little better became even stronger in her mind. From the next day, she increased the therapeutic load for the girl, insisted on the return of massage procedures, deciding that they were not harmful to the body, broken by the disease, and on the contrary, contribute to its tone. Elizabeth was still unresponsive to the change in regime. Only the appearance of Timothy's shaggy puppy seemed to revitalize her face a little. Amanda didn't give up. She wheeled her pram around the park. and sat Elizabeth down to watch Ashley's dog. He took the assignment seriously. Little Tim already knew the commands sit, down, down, place, come, walk. In the house, the Newfoundland recognized only two masters: Elizabeth, at whose feet he spent all his free time, and Ashley, who fed and brought him up. The days were running by, and the winter holidays, New Year's Eve and Christmas, everyone's favorite, were approaching. Amanda, Gabby, and Vanessa were happy to decorate the already pretty house with fir tree arrangements, colorful wreaths, and sculptures of fairy tale characters. Ashley installed artificial Christmas trees in all the rooms, richly decorated with expensive toys. Everyone was in a pre-holiday mood. 3 days before New Year's Eve, Amanda received an unexpected phone call from her only close friend. "Amanda, you're going to fall over. I have big news. I'm getting hastily married and moving to Florida with my lover. He's a military engineer. We're going to live near the Cape Canaveral spaceport." Amanda was instantly sad. With Olivia, they were like sisters almost, since the orphanage together, always supported each other, and now they were going to be separated. Meanwhile, her friend continued to chatter into the phone. "On the 30th of December, I have a farewell bachelorette party in a nightclub. On the 2nd of January, we have a one-way flight. No cancellations. Amanda, I've prepared a present for you for the road. I've made an evening dress. It's amazing. It's not worthy of your beauty, but it'll set it off beautifully." If Olivia could see me now, she would die laughing, thought the nurse. Recently, she had overheard Gaby's remarks about her. The maid gave her a scornful look after dinner and summarized. "Our therapist is a moth-pale mouse gray. How only the earth bears such shapeless, faceless women. They're worthless, and men probably avoid such a scarecrow a mile away." Amanda promised Olivia to call back by nightfall and went to Elizabeth's room. The girl, after a hearty dinner, a walk before, was already fast asleep, sprawled out on the soft pillows. After adjusting the blanket, she slipped out into the corridor. The conversation with Carl was not going to be easy. At her timid knock on the door of the study, the owner responded at once. "Come in. I've just finished going through the evening's papers. Is something the matter?" "I had an emergency." She outlined the situation in a nutshell, but I'll accept whatever you decide. "The fact is, someone close to me is going away for a long time. We won't get a chance to see each other if I can't make it to my friend's appointment. I'm not a warden in prison or a cousin in the zone to keep you locked up, Amanda. You've been in our house for a month and a half without leave. Elizabeth is doing well, if not brilliantly, without a hint of deterioration. I am pleased with your initiatives, methods, and practical experiments. None of them have been detrimental to my sick daughter. Be sure to go to the city. I'll give you 24 hours. On the 31st of December, after 8 p.m., you must return to these walls." Amanda didn't leave his office. She flew out on wings. Vanessa was in the kitchen, and the released nurse couldn't help but share her news with her. "I'm ugly," Amanda said, "but everyone wants a bit of colorful holiday. And when I get to see my Olivia again." "You're ugly?" She smiled back at the cook. "Save the fairy tales for others, my dear. All your masquerades won't fool me, a clever old lady who has lived in this world. I guessed long ago that you hide your beauty under a dull image, wearing glasses. Don't you worry, this secret stays between us. If you're doing this, you must have a good reason. All this cross-dressing doesn't interfere with your profession, but it's my business." Amanda turned round at a run, rushed back into the kitchen, and hugged the cookery master warmly and tenderly. "I know two angels of kindness in this house already. Vanessa, your kindness and willingness to understand and accept is in no way inferior to your host's graciousness." She gave Vanessa an embarrassed peck on her lush cheek, smelling of vanilla and apples, and rushed off to call Olivia to cheer her up with the news. Considering that Olivia worked as a fashion designer in one of the city's eyeliers, Amanda's dress had turned out to be luxurious. Soft, tight silk of dark blue color emphasized every curve of the graceful figure, while not forgetting all the proper charms and roundness, the neckline, and the slit on the leg to the very point and measure. A string of pearls, a bracelet, and earrings that her adoptive parents gave her on her 25th birthday, exactly in tone and in the general style of the outfit. As she dressed her friend in one of the changing booths in the attire, Olivia froze with admiration. Amanda, you are going to be a goddess this evening. And your fiancé, I'm sure he won't waver. He's already seen you in our shared photos. But the rest of the male sex will be at your feet, you'll see. Oh, I'd rather stay away from all these signs of intrusive male attention. Amanda replied bitterly. I've had enough sad experiences in this area. It seems to me that decent, if not knights, at least adequate gentlemen are no longer in this world. I have only come across representatives who managed to disappoint me for a long time. I'm going home to my flat to fix my hair and nails and stuff. I'll meet you at the club tonight. The place called Big City Lights met Amanda, who arrived by taxi with a stunningly colorful appearance. Dressed up fir trees and pine trees, colored lights and tinsel shining in their light, the crowd dressed to the hilt. Her favorite friend Olivia was wrong. There were many real beauties on the dance floor, at the tables, at the bar, worthy to become the prima donnas of this evening and the coming night. On the eve of the new year, it seemed that everyone tried not to hit in the dirt face. The audience was already relaxed by the fountain of hot drinks. Amanda breathed a sigh of relief. No one around her cared about her, but she was glad too soon. At one of the tables, Mason was having a good time with his friends, her first and only man. At the sight of Amanda relaxed and chatting serenely with Olivia and the rest of the girls, a greedy gleam lit up in the man's eyes. And that girl just got even more beautiful. I shouldn't have let that bird out of the love cage back then. Such a friend next to me will make the image of any successful man, he thought to himself, lewdly grinning. Today again, I will get her into bed. Deciding to give his victim at least one drink to make her more agreeable, Mason returned to his company, but kept Amanda in his sights. After about an hour, Mason ran out of patience. He decided to go and teach the wayward babe a lesson by humiliating her in front of her friends. Amanda suddenly appeared behind him with a banal greeting. I see what people are like without a bodyguard. Do you want me to protect your gorgeous body from the claims of other men? Amanda jerked away from Mason in surprise, but she didn't want to spoil Olivia's wonderful evening, so she quickly got up from the table and led Mason away from the bar. What do you want? You and I dotted all the I's and T's a long time ago. Go back to whoever you're spending the night with, and leave me alone. But it wasn't so easy to stop the smarmy bastard. He wasn't about to give up his intentions to sleep with such a lovely woman again. Come on, Amanda. Let's have a nice glass of red wine to this chance encounter and part as friends. I didn't mean to piss you off. I just thought you might have something to remember from the pages of our brief affair. The woman prudently decided not to make a scandal because of casual circumstances and obediently followed the man. At the counter, Mason ordered 2 glasses of some expensive grape wine and from an overseas collection, generously bought a chocolate bar and nuts sprinkled with sugar. He put his arm round Amanda's waist. The man's calculation was trivial, that now his old acquaintance would get drunk and become more docile, but he was wrong. Amanda drained her wine glass without even tasting it, and looked boldly into her ex-lover's eyes. Am I free of you now? Is the ritual honored? Mason was not accustomed to such behavior of ladies. He had never been refused, so he began to whisper in her ear. This is not the end of our New Year's Eve date, my dear. Don't get your hopes up. I'm going to rent a private office and you're going to be gentle with me. I remember everything, my lovely. Here we go again, Amanda thought with annoyance. Why is it that when a man is around, all his desires are always reduced to one thing? She looked around helplessly. There was no one around except a young man calmly sipping whiskey at the counter. Their eyes met, and what did the stranger read? But he slid valiantly off the bar stool and approached them. This woman is here with me. I only stepped away from the table for a short while, and you young man immediately took advantage of my absence. Mason's eyes widened in surprise. What kind of businessman are you? Where did you come from? Amanda remembered the rest of it as if in a nightmare. The man who had come to her rescue had lifted Mason off the floor like a feather and given him a solid slap on the wrist. But the bitchy, temper tantrum-hardened man didn't calm down. Before retreating from the battlefield, he grabbed his unfinished glass of red wine and splashed the brightly colored liquid directly onto Amanda's dress. A huge maroon stain instantly spread across the silk. The woman turned pale, and her unexpected knight grabbed her by the arm and dragged her to the bathroom. On the way, he said something about washing the cloth quickly, then there would be no trace left. Amanda was worried about something else entirely. No one had ever stood up for her before in her life. Suddenly, on some impulse, she threw her arms around the man's neck and dragged him with her to the club's exit, stopping only for a moment at the cloakroom to retrieve his coat. "I've got a car. I have an appointment here with an old friend, but he's running late." But Amanda didn't listen to him. As in a dream, she dragged the newly disembarked passengers along the cold autumn street to the car with checkers. She didn't care about propriety, about her ruined outfit, about the surprise of her companion who followed her obediently. There was only one single thought in her head. How good it is that I like to wear expensive silk linen. It won't be embarrassing. In her flat, where she had brought a random knight from the club, she pounced on the man like a tigress, like a ravenous March cat. And he didn't fight back. Everything that happened between them was like being in the Garden of Eden. The body sang, the soul rejoiced. The thoughts danced the can-can. How tired I am of being well-mannered and decent. Let it all be a one-time thing. I don't even know his name, though my casual lover is obviously handsome and not stupid. Of the latter, she was somehow sure, though they hadn't said a word to each other. In the morning, they fell asleep together without breaking their embrace, but Amanda woke up alone. Apart from the crumpled bed and a pillow that still smelled of a man's perfume, there was nothing in her flat that reminded her of the night before. She brewed coffee, pulled out her shoebox stash to buy Christmas presents for everyone in Carl's house. She was beginning to think of all these people as family. And the night, what could she do about it, that it had come to an end? All New Year's Eve magic comes to an end at some point. Gone was Father Christmas, having rid her of the vile mason. It's just a pity she didn't even feed the stranger breakfast, really. The fridge is empty, and there's no bread, not even a slice. But she can make delicious pancakes. Okay, flour, sugar, vanilla, milk. There's a block of frozen butter in the freezer. But dream away. She needs to get back to her chores. Amanda went back to her fancy dress of a simpleton fool, packed her bag and rang Andrew. Carl's driver had promised to take her shopping for presents and get her back to the manor by the appointed time. Amanda suddenly thought that the man she had spent this magical night with was also an angel of goodness and protection, at least for her personally. Her mood was twofold: sadness at the separation and something unfulfilled, and joy that such fireworks had happened in her rather bland life. At Carl's house, she and Andrew were there at 8 p.m. sharp, like clockwork. On the doorstep, Amanda was held up by Ashley and Tim. The gardener, embarrassed, handed her a bouquet made of spruce paws with pine cones and boughs of glittery sprinkles. Gabriella appeared on the porch, painted today, apparently in honor of New Year's Eve, in all the colors of the rainbow. Colored mascara, eyeliner, shadow, blush, lipstick. Strangely, with the maid's naturally good looks, it didn't even spoil her. "Why, Ashley, you've been flaunting your attentions all over the place, and you said you loved me to the grave. Are your feelings," she misspelled the word, "faded already? Have you switched to our doctor?" The modest, quiet, ordinary gardener suddenly decided to fight back. "I haven't had time to give you my simple gift yet, but don't touch Amanda. Don't you dare even speak to her in a disrespectful manner. You're not worth a fingernail." Gabriella gave Ashley a scornful glance and sang back, "Shut up already, you gardening scarecrow. You're not the one I'm waiting here for. Harry should be here soon. The man's no match for you. Learn from him what a man with a capital letter looks and acts like." Amanda took Ashley's arm and led her away from him to interrupt the unpleasant monologue. "You don't listen to her filthy words, Ashley. A man who can love plants and animals so well, it's like he's an extension of them on this earth. Some of us become an angel of kindness to others, heals and saves lost, unhappy souls. And someone becomes a kind of shepherd, guide, conductor for flora and fauna, protects it from human cruelty, uses people for good, not spoiling, sparing, wisely. You are one of such angels of goodness for Mother Nature. Be proud of such an exceptional status. You have earned it." Amanda pecked the confused Ashley on the cheek and walked up the stairs. In the distance, she heard the sound of a car approaching the house, but she was already running to her ward. It was New Year's Eve, and Elizabeth wasn't ready. Vanessa had her hands full with the table. Everything was sparkling and glittering in the decorated hall. The table was bursting with food and drink, and all the family was dressed up. Even Amanda had changed her shapeless jumper for a white blouse with lace and a black skirt. The only things left in place were the wispy curl on her head and the funny glasses on the bridge of her nose. Carl came to the table in a soft cashmere pullover and loose light-colored trousers. Vanessa had little gold tinsel bows on her head and in her apron. Gabriella wore a provocative purple dress with a low neckline and a deep cutout on the back. It was the way the dishes were served to the table. In her chair sat a rather plain Elizabeth, wearing a delicate violet-colored dress. Amanda had done her hair. The girl looked refreshed. At her feet, as usual, lay the faithful guard Timothy. Ashley had specially washed him with dog shampoo for the holiday. His coat was shiny and even silvery in places. Amanda had already handed out presents to everyone, little Christmas decorations depicting angels in various outfits. All of them, if you shook them a little, made a melodious chime. We started to sit down at the table at 22 in the evening. We had to see off the old year, thank it for all the good things, and ask it to take the bad things with it. Carl went out to hurry his son, and soon they were in the hall together. Amanda was just taking a sip of orange juice when the man she had spent tonight with appeared in front of Elizabeth and her. She even caught the end of the sentence. "I'm sorry, Father, I was late. There were unforeseen circumstances. And then I also had to reschedule an important business meeting that had canceled yesterday." Amanda choked up and blinked her eyes, frightened. And then a miracle happened in front of everyone. There was no other word for it. Elizabeth became animated, reached out to her brother, and then made a gesture towards the floor and inarticulately said, "Naïf." Everyone was stunned and rushed to brace and hug the girl. Amanda slipped quietly from the table in the midst of the commotion. Let her relatives stay together. Without her, no one would notice her absence, and she needed to recover from the unexpected shock of discovery. The man of her dreams, her mysterious night visitor, and Carl's son were one and the same person. She was shaking all over with confusion. At the table, it was soon discovered that Elizabeth's carer and her doctor, who had brought such a joyous event to the house, had gone somewhere. Harry was sent in search of her, and he knocked insistently on the door of the house physician, then opened it a little, but found nothing in the room but the sound of water running in the bath. Deciding that the woman might have been taken ill, the man pushed the bathroom door resolutely open. Above the bathtub, bent over, Amanda was furiously rubbing some kind of cloth, dropping tears into the water. She turned round at the noise of the door opening. She wasn't wearing her ugly glasses now. Her hair was loose down her back, and Harry caught a glimpse of something very familiar about her. Then he moved his eyes to the bathtub where a beautiful dark blue silk dress lay. The puzzle came together. You? Harry shrieked in surprise, and I came back with champagne, provisions, a bouquet of flowers to your flat, but it was empty. I almost went mad with despair. I thought I'd lost my night fairy forever." Amanda boldly stepped into his open arms. To hell with all principles, decency, rules. This man had turned her soul upside down yesterday. People on this earth meet and get to know each other in different ways. She feels good with him, the rest doesn't matter. Harry let the girl out first. "Quickly put something on. It's only 5 minutes until the chimes strike. We'll make it in time." There was no time for the usual masquerade. Amanda's blouse and skirt were all wet. She pulled on her tight jeans and white jumper in a matter of seconds, didn't bother to brush her hair. They arrived at the table as the chimes struck. Champagne bubbles were playing in the glasses. Vanessa's culinary creations were waiting on the table. Even Elizabeth tried to put a semblance of a smile on her face. Carl did not ask his son a single question, only glanced at the young people seated at the table next to him. Vanessa thought to herself, and with that, we'll soon have children's voices in our house again. Ashley smiled happily, stroking Tim's back. Gabriella was biting her lip nervously and chewing on a red fish sandwich. so I'll have Ashley stolen from me soon enough if I'm catching crows. Now I'll have to accept the gardener's advances if I'm to stay in this house and get more of a foothold. He's not a bad chap, he's kind and handy, and quite handsome. The New Year's Eve night was truly fairy tale and magical, just as it should have been. Everyone at the table was happy in his own way. The long-awaited winter holidays flew by in the midst of entertainment and rest. Only Amanda worked tirelessly with Elizabeth to consolidate her success. On his first day at work, Carl realized that he had relaxed too much over the weekend and decided to be home early. Quietly stepping on the soft carpeted walkway, he walked to the door of his daughter's room and witnessed Elizabeth's new victories. Nuff, Tima, Daddy, Harry, Vanessa, Ashley, Amanda. Gaby Elizabeth dutifully repeated the syllables after Amanda. Carl rounded the corner of the corridor and cried. A panel appointed by Amanda's teacher 10 days later gave a reassuring summary the disease had subsided. The process of cell and tissue destruction had slowed down. The remission period had already exceeded all known scientific limits. Carl, I told you Amanda is an excellent specialist. In our case, expecting a full recovery is a bit of a stretch. But your daughter has shown marked improvement in her general condition. She's starting to react to the outside world. Weakly, not much, but she's starting to talk again. You know, I was thinking, if the patient lives surrounded by angels of goodness, as my student characterized it to me, he has every chance to stay on this earth for some more time, and you will make him as happy as possible for her. I am sure of it. 6 months have passed. The plane leaving on the morning flight to Prague was delayed due to weather conditions. The cute young couple kept glancing at the electronic board and at each other. Harry, what if I hadn't gone to that ill-fated nightclub then? You would have seen me in the image of a monster and would not pay attention to me, asked the mum-to-be, with a rather noticeable rounded tummy. Come on. The man answered her, adjusting his wedding ring on his finger. I would have seen you through all your disguises. Your angelic soul, your ability to do good cannot be hidden. I'd fall for such radiant magic. The iron, monotonous voice of the announcer announced the boarding of their flight. The couple hugged each other and slowly walked towards the boarding point. We will finish all my business in Prague now. You will see this beautiful city, and we will hurry to our home. Elizabeth, do you know what she gave me before we left? Harry, Amanda, Elizabeth, Tim is waiting. It's a puzzle. We can't let them all down. Without us, the circle of good angels would be incomplete. Uncle, will you finish your meal without thinking? Vincent fed the little girl, and when there was a knock on the door. The sun was scorching, and the July heat was melting the asphalt. Even in the car, the smell of bitumen lingered. Vincent tolerated the odor for a while, but when invisible cats began to scratch at his throat like stone, he closed the window. But that only made things worse, because there was no room to breathe. The man cursed the weather out loud, and at the same time he cursed himself. But how long would this scorcher last? It seemed that the heavenly office had decided to wipe out the population of our planet with heat. Well, I did a good job, too, he said to himself. One should strike while the iron is hot. And what if we fail again, like last time? All the time I'd wasted looking for it, and I'd gotten nothing. Vincent wasn't embarrassed by the fact that he'd combined two expressions into one. In general, he liked to experiment in this area, and often amused his colleagues with his ingenious expressions. The thought of work was always a positive one. No, Vincent was not a workaholic, nor did he intend to burn out one day. The secret of his special attitude to his professional duties lay in two key points: a good salary and a close-knit team of men. More than once, Vincent found himself thinking that he was fabulously lucky, despite certain circumstances in his personal life. After all, not every man his age has an apartment, a car, and a good job. The only trouble spot was the bachelor life. He has long wanted to start a family, necessarily with several children. But unfortunately, he has not yet met a girl who would share his aspirations. A dazzling red Ferrari sped past, and a wave of air blew in through the window, which Vincent opened again as he gasped for air. What a lot of rich people there are. He commented on another example of road rage. Do they think they're allowed to do anything? Vincent had nothing against the children of the rich, but he thought that even they should not forget the mortality of human existence. Vincent had learned these simple truths from early childhood, though he did not like to remember that period of his own life. It was a good 3 hours' drive to the provincial town of Goldfields, the last point on his itinerary. Toward noon, the clouds covered the hot sun, and it was easier to breathe. Vincent opened the window fully and enjoyed the cool breeze. A picture from the distant past immediately came to mind. How he'd stood in the courtyard with his eyes closed, waiting in horror to see what would happen to him next. Vincent had been unlucky in his birthplace, or his parents. But he remembered little of his early years. The boy had existed in the full sense of the word, not lived. Along with him suffered a little sister, whose name he could not remember. His mother's face the memory did not want to show either. When he strained hard, trying to get to the farthest corners of this vault, 2 blurred spots surfaced from oblivion. The second image belonged to his stepfather, but their voices were distinct. "Greg, I had another bottle in my stash. Did you steal it? Is he going to take it out on me?" Greg asked his son. "Maybe he stashed it. Look at the way he's looking, the wolf boy." Vincent remembered the scene well. His stepfather rose from the table and moved toward him. "Vincent, Uncle Greg is telling the truth. Did you take the lemonade bottle? Tell me where you hid it, or your mommy will die," Greg said with a laugh. "What's not good? Why are you scaring me? In front of a boy of 3 years of life, spank him properly. He'll tell you even what he doesn't know." Encouraged by the man, the mother hovered over the child. "Vincent," said the man tiredly, "I'm very scared." And he cried out, "Mommy, don't hit me, please. I didn't drink your lemonade." Uncle Greg added frankly with this scene. As the situation reached its peak, he peacefully said the whole of Alabama is going to back off from the fight. Kid, he's the one who's going to shit his pants out of fear right now, had nothing to do with it. "Come closer to me and I'll show you a trick," said the man. With an imperceptible movement, he pulled a bottle from his sleeve, and to the enthusiastic shouts of his mother, "Wow, Greg, you're a fucking magician." I almost punished the kid. Look, he's still shaking with fear. He'll be laughing in a minute. Right, Vincent? Uncle Greg first showed the boy his empty palm, then clenched his hand into a fist and said, "You beast. We woke up by the river, and you're in the morgue, you creep." The stepfather opened his palm again, and the boy saw on it 2 caramels behind Mussolini wrappers. Hold on tight while Uncle Greg is kind and called his little sister to visit. When his stepfather was sober, he sometimes showed Vincent card tricks. The 6-year-old boy was mesmerized by the man's deft hands, but he never managed to figure out the secret of the trick. "They taught me that in the zone. They're smart people there, kid, even Ph.D.S. Uncle Greg said in a satisfied tone. Vincent vividly remembered that tragic day when he and his little sister had run away from their mother's drunken company. There had been a lot of strangers in the house. Uncle Greg was very angry and ordered, "Sticky children, go away somewhere. Their own freaks do not give rest, all the time tangled underfoot, and the girl in addition still yells without end." The mother was still in an adequate state and started to object. "They don't bother anyone. They sit quietly in the kitchen, playing. And where am I going to take the kids? Let them go to their grandmother. And if I send them to that snake under the hood, she'll report me to the guardianship office. What, Mary? Am I going to get my parental rights revoked? That's a disaster. I'm sorry, but you're as much of a mother as I am a Chinese tea leaf picker. They can take away your parental rights, but you'll be completely free. What am I going to live on? Have you thought about that? I'm on single mom's allowance for both of them. There's not much hope for you, Greg, because today you're here and tomorrow you'll be back in the slammer." The man jumped up and went at his mother with his fists. "You want me to shut you up for good?" Vincent heard every last word, but understood nothing. He still didn't understand what had made him grab his little sister in his arms and run away from the house, where another scandal was brewing. Perhaps at the critical moment he triggered an innate instinct which is called intuition. But the grandmother and her acquaintances called it a miracle. When the woman saw her grandchildren on the doorstep, she proclaimed, "Again, these lousy drunks are having fun with bread. They've gone completely off the rails. They don't think about their children. It's time to put an end to this mess. Tomorrow I'll go to the guardianship office." Even in an orphanage, the kids will be better off than with a mom like that. Even though she's my daughter, I can't stand it anymore. All these claims grandmother expressed in one breath. Tired from the emotional shock, Vincent listened to her, afraid to move. If he disobeyed her, she might throw them out on the street. But Amelie, despite her harsh nature, loved and pitied her grandchildren. She washed them, then fed them and put them to bed. But their sleep didn't last long because they heard shouting outside. Then there was a loud knock on the window. "Amelie, get up. There seems to be a fire in the cul-de-sac. Didn't your prisoners set Pompeii on fire?" Grandmother jumped up and threw her coat over her nightgown. She ran out of the house with her head uncovered, saying, "Vincent, you watch your little sister. I'll run and see what's wrong." Grandma was gone for a long time, and Vincent fell asleep again. Here is the edited text with the names changed to American names. The man jumped up and moved at his mother with his fists. "It's up to you. Do you want me to shut you up for good?" Vincent heard every last word, but understood nothing. He still didn't understand what had made him grab his little sister in his arms and run away from the house, where another scandal was brewing. Perhaps at the critical moment he triggered an innate instinct, which is called intuition. But the grandmother and her acquaintances called it a miracle. When the woman saw her grandchildren on the doorstep, she proclaimed, "Again, these lousy drunks are having fun with bread. They've gone completely off the rails. They don't think about their children. It's time to put an end to this mess. Tomorrow I'll go to the guardianship office. Even in an orphanage, the kids will be better off than with a mom like that. Even though she's my daughter, I can't stand it anymore." All these claims grandmother expressed in one breath. Tired from the emotional shock, Vincent listened to her, afraid to move. If he disobeyed her, she might throw them out on the street. But Amelie, despite her harsh nature, loved and pitied her grandchildren. She washed them, then fed them and put them to bed. But their sleep didn't last long because they heard shouting outside. Then there was a loud knock on the window. "Amelie, get up. There seems to be a fire in the cul-de-sac. Didn't your prisoners set Pompeii on fire?" Grandmother jumped up and threw her coat over her nightgown. She ran out of the house with her head uncovered, saying, "Vincent, you watch your little sister. I'll run and see what's wrong." Grandmother was gone for a long time, and Vincent fell asleep again. Emily appeared when it was light outside the window. She did not cry, but often crossed herself before the images. "Lord, rest their souls and forgive their sins," she said. Amelie did not immediately notice that Vincent was awake. She came over and sat down on the edge of the bed. "You heard everything, my good man," she said to the boy. "You and Emily are orphans now. Why did such grief befall the innocent angels?" The woman shouted the last phrase in despair. Emily woke up and cried. Grandmother Amelie pressed the heads of her grandchildren to her and began to kiss them. "What is it, my dears?" "God will help us. Don't be afraid. You won't be lost with me," she comforted the children. Vincent and little Emily stayed with their grandmother. Vincent remembered the word funeral well, but he didn't have to attend the ceremony, although his sister Zendeja persuaded her. "Amelie, you can't do that. It's their mother." "Zendia, you can't say that about the dead," Amelie replied. "But Luba was a bad mother. She left nothing good in her memory. And there's no reason for the child to be at the funeral. Then I'll take them to their mother's grave to worship her. The first thing to do is to baptize them. We can't have children walking around unbaptized. I just don't know who I should ask to be my godparents." Aunt Zendaya was eager to tell them. Nayeli is a midwife by profession. I don't think she'd say no. She's family, even though she's distant. She can't have a child of her own, so at least she'll take care of orphans. And again, they're not other people's kids. Maybe then God will take pity on her and send her a child of her own? Vincent remembered the smell of candles and the priest's long prayer. Emily cried the whole time. An unfamiliar woman named Nayeli rocked her in her arms. The adults repeated some words after the priest and crossed themselves. The boy liked most of all the climax of the rite, when he and his sister were put a cross around their necks. The grandmother was very satisfied that she had fulfilled her main mission. Now the children will be under the protection of the angels, she told her relatives. Aunt Zendaya grinned. And who will feed and water them? The angels? Amelie slammed her fist on the table. No blasphemy in my house. I will not give up my grandchildren. I will raise them myself. And by law, orphans are entitled to an allowance. Suddenly, Aunt Nellie intervened. She was the first person Vincent had ever heard of that there were orphanages. She said in a tone of voice that brooked no objection. Your aunt will not leave you any children. Do not even try to solve this issue in your favor. Amelie's grandmother was indignant. I have every right, because apart from me the children have no other close relatives. For what reason can I be forbidden to raise my grandchildren? Relative Tien looked at the grandmother with a cold gaze. The main reason is your age and health condition. Vincent will be placed in an orphanage. Little Emily will be placed in the children's home. Amelie was furious. What am I supposed to do? You won't do anything. This matter is under special control and no one will allow you to go against the letter of the law. Tiana cut her off. The only thing I can offer you is, well, I talked to my husband and he's fine with fostering the baby. And Vincent? How can you separate brother and sister? Just take them both. The crown won't fall off their heads. I can visit the children and help as much as I can, Amelie said pleadingly. But Aunt Nellie didn't like the idea. She fidgeted and clumsily explained why she couldn't take in 2 children. Auntie, you don't understand. My husband is a very busy man, and I'm just a free supplement to his person. That's not a joke. Stephen runs the family. I barely talked him into having a girl, so I'm afraid to imagine how he'd react to the idea of having a boy. Vincent heard all this and cried, huddled in the corner of the couch. It hurt him to be spoken of as if he were a doll to be given away. He barely waited for that nasty Aunt Nellie to speak and ran up to her. Auntie, do you look like Baba Yaga? And your Stephen is Kashi the Immortal. I won't go to live with you myself, even if you ask me to. The women looked at the boy with amazement. Aunt Nellie was the first to comment on this outburst. You can see for yourself how unruly the boy is. And this at 6 years of age. What's going to happen to him next? Aunt Zendaya tried to intercede on Vincent's behalf. It's not surprising with that kind of upbringing. In good hands, the child will do well. Aunt Nellie rolled her eyes. Perhaps. But I'm not ready for such a feat. The girl is very young, and it will be easier for us to train her. Grandma Amelie interrupted a relative. Nellie, you can train a kitten to go to the right place. You can't talk about children like that, and I doubt you'd make a loving mother. Personally, I'll be against the kids being separated. Unfortunately, no one took Grandma's opinion into account. It was only a few days later that Aunt Nellie took Emily's little sister. Vincent lived with Grandma for a little while longer, but strange women came to pick him up and took him away in a car as well. His grandmother cried as she said goodbye to him and whispered, Vincent, you take care of your cross. Don't lose it by accident. It will protect you from any misfortune. All the way he clutched that church-consecrated amulet to his breast. He must have done it so expressively that one of the accompanying women asked him affectionately, Little one, what are you there behind your sinuses? Are you crying? The second woman advised her partner, Look what's in there. Or what if he wants to sneak something nasty with him into a closed institution? Then we'll be reprimanded for it. The first woman looked him in the eye and smiled. You show me what you've got there. Vincent liked this woman immediately because she was kind. He carefully took out a small silver cross on a thin chain from her pocket. The kind official stroked his head. Thank you. You can hide everything, little one. False alarm. The child has an ordinary cross, no forbidden items. They had another long car ride, and the rest of the way Vincent thought that he would be very happy if this kind woman wanted to adopt him. But children's dreams don't always come true. Vincent spent 2 years in an orphanage. He has no good memories of this period, because every day the boy experienced humiliation from the older students of the institution. And not all educators showed cordiality and kindness to their wards. The idea to escape from the orphanage was born somewhere in Vincent's subconscious in the first days. Of course, the 6-year-old boy had little idea how to realize this plan, given that in the institution kids were under the watchful eye of educators, and it was almost impossible to do it. But despite the strict regime, there were regular escapes in the children's institution. Only the older kids dared to take such a desperate step, so Vincent had to postpone this plan until a more convenient time. The boy didn't share his intention with anyone. Only once he mentioned that he had a little sister, Emily, and wanted to run away to find her. But the fellow in distress did not hold back and told everything to Tiana. The nickname of the famous fairy tale character was given by the children to the night caretaker Tiana, who was characterized by a harmful character. Tiana first dragged Vincent out into the hallway and hung him by the collar of his shirt so that he began to choke. But for a woman with a damaged psyche, it was a pleasure to be able to abuse a child. "So, you little bastard, are you going on the run? I'll make you run away. You'll be afraid to go to the toilet?" she screamed. Vincent shouted, but no one dared to come to his aid, although a dozen or two kids were watching. Satisfied, Tiana went to the principal to report that the escape attempt had been thwarted. Since the boy was still very young, he was locked up in the infirmary for 10 days as punishment. Tiana came every night to see how he was doing. The woman watched him with her full face pressed tightly against the glass doors. In some wild rage, she shouted, "Are you all right there? Haven't you changed your mind about running yet? If it were up to me, I'd have you on your knees for 24 hours. Then you'd be silky smooth." Tiana added other unpleasant things like, "I wish your teeth would grow," and crooked Vincent couldn't be rude to her, because he'd get an extended sentence. Vincent endured the humiliation, silently swallowing his tears. Only at the very end of his imprisonment, Nurse Anna spotted Tiana during another act of bullying. Anna was shocked by what the employee, who was obliged by duty to take care of the children, was doing. She first tried to talk some sense into the inadequate woman. "Tiana, how can you not be ashamed? After all, he is just a child and you pour your anger on him. And what has this boy done to you?" Tiana didn't even raise an eyebrow. "Not yet, but he was about to run away. And you shouldn't feel sorry for such damaged people, because they won't grow up to be anything good anyway, unless the children of a normal mother. Maybe then a normal child would be born? And these genes are already spoiled. There's only one way to go to the zone." Anna started to chase the teacher away. "Stop this at once. I won't let you abuse a helpless child. And who are you to make such conclusions?" Tiana was already threatening Anna. Vincent heard Anna say, "That's enough, Tiana. Get out of here. I warn you, I will report your outrageous behavior to the principal today." Tiana shouted from behind the door. "I don't give a damn about your threats. I have worked here and will continue to work here, because no one will agree to wipe the snot out of these little brats for such a meager salary. That's why there's always a staff shortage in orphanages." Most likely, Anna kept her promise, because the cruel Tiana no longer appeared in the orphanage, although her departure didn't change the situation much. Vincent didn't speak frankly to anyone else. It was the first life lesson he had learned. But thoughts of his little sister Emily haunted him constantly, especially before bedtime. The boy recalled unhappy events and thought, "How is my little sister? She must be being abused by Aunt Rosa and her husband." The most surprising thing was that Vincent could never remember his sister's name. And when his parents got drunk, they just called the little girl Baby or Little One. Vincent couldn't remember the name of the town where he was born and where his mother died in a fire. The image of Amelie was also constantly in front of the child's eyes. Despite her promises, Nayli never visited him. He later learned from a caregiver that she died quietly soon after her grandchildren were taken away from her. Life at the orphanage was monotonous, except for those rare occasions when couples came to pick out a child. On such days, the older children and babies waited breathlessly to be chosen. But Vincent was terrified of the fate of being taken in by strangers, and he tried to hide away so he wouldn't be seen by prospective parents. As he moved into 3rd grade, he stopped believing in miracles. Vincent laughed at the kids who still dreamed of adoption. Don't you jerks know that all these moms and dads pretend to be nice, but they don't really need you? First, they'll take you away, and then they'll throw you in the garbage or make you beg in the subway. Since there was little support for his opinion, he had to endure a barrage of criticism after he said it. Vince, you're angry because you're not elected. Do you want to go into foster care yourself? Even the older kids felt that way. They too believed in their guiding star, dreaming of being in a healthy family. Vincent was at an early age when he couldn't understand why he was rejecting the very possibility of change in his life. It was summer vacation, and many of the children had left the orphanage for a while. Vincent was playing ball with the boys on the playground when Abby Swan came to pick him up. Vincent, I'm coming for you. Let's go to the principal's office. Why? I didn't do anything wrong. Do you have to do something bad to get into the principal's office? Sometimes you're called there for a good reason. The kid waved to his comrades. Guys, play without me for now. I'll be back soon. Here's the edited text with your edits. Abby Swan gave him a gentle nudge. I don't think it'll be soon. The puzzled boy followed the nurse and wondered, but nothing useful came to his mind. In the office where he had been only once, there were two other people, a man and a woman, in addition to the principal. When Vincent entered, he said a polite hello. The headmistress said with feigned cheerfulness, Here he is, our Vincent, but you can also call him as an adult Vincent Bogdanovich. So please love and welcome. The man stood up and gave the boy his hand. This is Nicholas Yurievich Brooks, and this is Rose, my wife. The guest nodded toward the woman, and she also stood up. The principal said in the same excited voice, Vincent, our guests have come specially too. But Nicholas gestured for the head of the institution to be silent. Let me do the talking. The mistress of the office did not like this dismissive attitude, and she already, without the previous optimism, said, Well, I will not interfere with you while you chat here. I'm going to go check on the food processor. When she came out, Nicholas sat Vincent down beside her and said simply, You see, brother, we've had the misfortune to have a son die of a terminal illness. It was a long time ago, but he's always in our hearts. At first, Rose and I thought we were going to live with the memories, but then we decided it wasn't right. Vincent made up his mind and looked straight into the man's eyes. Why? Because you can't wallow in your grief. It just makes you feel more alone. And then we thought it was in our power to make someone happy. Until then, Nicholas had been silent. Rose sat down next to Vincent. We've come here several times before. You may not believe this, but the first time I saw you, my heart fluttered. The boy marveled. Does it happen like that? The woman smiled. It happens, but very rarely. Only on special occasions. And this is a very special and very important moment for Nicholas and me. Vincent saw the two adults looking at him hopefully and anxiously. There was a warmth from them that the boy wanted to cuddle into. He asked quietly, Do you want to adopt me? Nicholas replied, See, do you understand? Our intentions are yours to decide. If you need time to think about it, we're willing to wait. You don't have to wait. You are kind. I can feel it. I agree to be your son and I will try to obey you in everything. Rose cried and held him close to her. The woman's embrace was as gentle as Vincent's grandmother's. I wanted to sit next to her for a long, long time. It was as if Nicholas had read his mind. Thank you for giving us hope. We will try to be real parents to you. Later, when the first emotions had subsided, Nicholas said, as if by the way, to fulfill all the desires of others, it is unpleasant and harmful. We are not going to suppress your will. Personally, I am in favor of arguing, because in the dispute is born the truth. But it has to be done in a kind way. Vincent didn't understand why he was speaking so strangely. The man noticed the confusion and explained with a smile. Never keep your thoughts and feelings inside, no matter what they are. Share your joys and sorrows with us, and know that we will always help you. This assurance made the boy even more sure that he had a lucky ticket. In September, Vincent went to a new school, where he quickly settled in. The boy did not tell any of his classmates about his past life, and his foster parents praised him for that. Rose looked thoughtfully out of the window and said in a low voice, "You did a very sensible thing. People are different, some sympathize with you, and some will rejoice at your misfortune. And there is no need for outsiders to be involved in our family affairs. The most important thing is that the three of us are always happy together." Vincent liked Brooks' house very much. He felt safe and comfortable there. The boy had his own room and desk to study at. In his spare time, Vincent could play computer games or go to the martial arts training center where Nicholas had enrolled him. His foster parents didn't demand anything impossible from the boy and never imposed their own opinions on him. Everything was going well, but the first alarm bell rang at the wrong time. Vincent was getting used to his new life when Rose said, "Vincent, we're going to go to the cemetery with Nicholas. We'd like you to join us. Of course you could stay home, but..." The boy felt ashamed that this kind woman was asking him for such a small thing. "I will go with you," he answered. The woman smiled, the expression on her face that Vincent liked best. She shouted toward the kitchen, "Nicholas, I talked to Vincent. He agrees. Tell me, when are we leaving?" The foster father appeared from the kitchen and said with a satisfied look, "I'm ready. We can leave right away." The teenager had no idea what awaited him in the next half hour. The foster parents, their heads sorrowfully lowered, walked to the ornate memorial. The entire complex covered a decent-sized area, and all the elements were made of black marble. A boy about his age was looking straight at Vincent from the monument. He lowered his eyes a little lower and read, "Brooks Vincent Nicholas." The 11-year-old's consciousness was burned by the thought, which he spoke aloud. "So, your son's name was Vincent, too?" Rose smiled again. "Yes, my good man. And we wanted to find a boy who looked just like him." Vincent really wanted to run away because he didn't want to be a copy of the dead man. But his adoptive parents didn't realize their mistake. They had no idea what was going on in the child's soul at that moment. Afterwards, such events were repeated regularly, and Vincent was obliged to go with his parents to the grave of his predecessor. It was then that he realized that good, kind people didn't like him. In his free time, Vincent could play computer games or go to training in martial arts, where Nicholas immediately enrolled him. His foster parents didn't demand anything impossible from the boy and never imposed their own opinions on him. Everything was going well, but the first alarm bell rang at the wrong time. Vincent was getting used to his new life when Rose said, "Vincent, we're going to go to the cemetery with Nicholas. We'd like you to join us. Of course you could stay home, but..." The boy felt ashamed that this kind woman was asking him for such a small thing. "I will go with you," he answered. The woman smiled, the expression on her face that Vincent liked best. She shouted toward the kitchen, "Nicholas, I talked to Vincent. He agrees. Tell me, when are we leaving?" The foster father appeared from the kitchen and said with a satisfied look, "I'm ready. We can leave right away." The teenager had no idea what awaited him in the next half hour. The foster parents, their heads sorrowfully lowered, walked to the ornate memorial. The entire complex covered a decent-sized area, and all the elements were made of black marble. A boy about his age was looking straight at Vincent from the monument. He lowered his eyes a little lower and read, "Brooks Vincent Nicholas." The 11-year-old's consciousness was burned by the thought, which he spoke aloud. "So, your son's name was Vincent, too?" Rose smiled again. "Yes, my good man. And we wanted to find a boy who looked just like him." Vincent really wanted to run away because he didn't want to be a copy of the dead man. But his adoptive parents didn't realize their mistake. They had no idea what was going on in the child's soul at that moment. The boy from the orphanage served as a kind of altar for the couple, where they carried their parental love for their dead child. As Vincent grew older, he realized that he was just a sacrifice that the fanatical parents had made in honor of their dead son. This feeling was so strong that he again began to think about running away. But the boy decided not to hurry, to wait until he was of age. He now began to often lock himself in his room and shorten the time, communicating with peers and social networks. And before going to bed, as an old habit, indulged in his dreams. As soon as I finish school, I'll leave this house. I don't need their money. I won't go to the institute either. I'll find some profession that I need, but I'll find money. And this plan Vincent was able to carry out in full. At Nicholas's insistence, he applied to the Polytechnic Institute in the same city where his adoptive parents lived. But after the first half of the year, the young man said, "I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an engineer. And in general, I reviewed a lot of things in my life." Rose was confused. "Vincent, what are you talking about? You're the most important thing in our lives. You're the most important thing in our lives." The young man interrupted his foster mother. "Rose, don't kid yourself and me. You're not doing everything for me. It's for him. The one I've been replacing for so many years. I don't resent you, but I don't want to be somebody anymore. I think I've earned the right to be myself." The couple looked at him with horror and pain. For a moment, Vincent felt sorry for them, but he knew very well that he could not go on like this. Nicholas read a lot in his foster son's eyes. He asked quietly, "Do you despise us now? You will not come to us anymore?" The young man again saw that penetrating look, which confused his young heart then, in the orphanage. And that pain came back to life in his soul. He put his arms around Aubrey Swan. "I'll never forget what you've done for me. And there's no one in the whole world closer to you. Please don't take offense, but I want to make my own life. And I'll visit you, because you're my parents too." Vincent made some useful acquaintances at the institute, and one of the faculty members helped him enroll in a college that trained specialists for the defense industry. The uniqueness of this form of education was that you could work and learn a very rare profession at the same time. Housing was also provided to all employees of the company on a rental basis. In 10 years, Vincent already had his own one-room apartment. However, his foster parents helped him buy it, and he had recently bought the car he had dreamed of for many years. Houston was behind him, and Vince returned once more to the Navigator. Canyon City was less than 50 kilometers away. The excitement grew as he neared his final destination, and the man whispered, "I wonder what awaits me in a town with such an unusual name. Would I not find my sister there? Thank goodness I have her information now." Vincent spent years searching for her. He tried to locate his sister through the orphanage where he had spent only 3 years, but he was at first firmly refused this favor when he asked at least for the name of the town where he used to live. The lady in the clerk's office gave him a stern look and declared, "We are not authorized to divulge confidential information." Vince tried to explain to the woman, "You misunderstand me. I'm trying to find out information that concerns me directly. I wasn't 6 years old when my sister and I were separated, and now I want to find her. I think that's a normal desire. And I'm just asking you to help me a little." The lady hesitated for a long time, but then gave in. She first looked back at the door of her office, and then she drew the name of the township on a piece of paper. "It's a town, but 300 kilometers from here. Maybe someone there can tell you where your sister is." Vincent wasted no time and headed for the district town where he had spent the first years of his life. When he arrived, his memory began to jog his memory, and he found the cul-de-sac where he used to live with his mother. The burnt house was now a weedy wasteland. Suddenly, an elderly woman approached him. "Are you looking for someone? Maybe I can help you?" "I don't think you can help me. It's been over 20 years. I lived in a house that burned down, and I had a little sister." The woman clutched at her heart. "Oh my God, if it isn't you, Vincent, how grown up and handsome. A real one." The young man did not expect such a strong reaction and embarrassedly said, "It's me. You're not mistaken, are you?" He tried to smile, but it didn't come out well, and he only wrinkled his nose as if he had eaten a lemon. The woman wailed again. The way was hard. Your mother is your own blood, but I still feel sorry for her. It was an unenviable fate for her, and the girl Kira was taken away by a relative. Do you know where she lives?" The woman waved her hands in despair. "What are you? How should I know?" He was about to leave, but the woman stopped him. "If you go to your grandmother, she's also long gone. The house has been bought by newcomers. Talk to them. Maybe they'll tell you where to find your sister." Vincent went on his way, but the woman caught up with him again. "Old age is no fun. It just slipped my mind. Go to Zendeja. She knows exactly where the girl has been taken." Vincent was surprised that he had forgotten about Aunt Zendia, who was almost always at his grandmother's house. But he'd found her place of residence after a long wander among the low-rise houses that dominated the neighborhood. He went up to the second floor and rang for a long time at apartment number 5. No one answered, and Vincent wanted to leave. When he heard footsteps approaching the door, after a moment's hesitation, the man called out, "I'm looking for Aunt Zendeja." From outside the door, they also shouted, "I don't have any nephews, and I don't open to crooks." The footsteps began to move away, and Vincent had to shout half a tone louder, "Aunt Zendeja. I'm Vincent, Amelia's grandson. You must remember me." Footsteps returned to the door. While the landlady fiddled with the lock, a middle-aged, tall, gray-haired man looked out of the next apartment. "You mustn't believe her fantasies, or she'll say things that will blow your mind." Vincent didn't have time to say anything, because Zendia herself interrupted his neighbor's remarks. He could hardly recognize the old woman who had bent down and made the obscene gesture as the stately woman who often appeared at his grandmother's house. The obscene gesture Aunt Zendeja complimented it with insults against the man. "Are you the one who is not at home?" "I'm still fine with my head. I don't steal gasoline from the neighbors' cars at night, and I don't run around with girls." The man's face was flushed with paint, and he slammed the door shut with a bang. But the cheerful, revenge-seeking old woman came to the neighbor's door and showed another obscene gesture through the peephole. Satisfied with herself, she invited Vincent into the apartment, which was a mess. Because of the mess, the woman didn't even offer him a seat. They stood in the hallway, and she tried to get a good look at him in the dim light of a low-wattage bulb. When the viewing was over, the old woman asked with undisguised irritation, "Well, tell me, why did you come? You see how I live, and nobody cares about me." Sensing that Aunt Zendaya was about to turn the conversation to her personal problems, Vincent told her the purpose of his visit. The old woman perked up at once. "Why didn't you tell me what you were doing?" "You're looking for Kira, her. After her aunt took her away, I never heard from her. You should be looking for your aunt in Los Angeles. I don't remember the name of the city where she wrote to me, but I still have a card from her congratulating me on March 8th. The old lady hurried into the room and soon returned with a postcard. "Here you are. I don't need it. I haven't written a letter to anyone in a long time." Vincent took the card from Aunt Zendia's hands and ran his eyes over the address. He could tell by the determined look on her face that she wasn't going to be hospitable. He took 2 5,000 bills out of his wallet and handed them to the old woman. "Here, buy yourself something tasty." The old woman smiled, but she clutched the money in her fist. "Vincent, are you leaving already? Can't we at least have a cup of tea together?" But the young man politely declined the offer. After such a cold reception, he had no desire to be stuck with his relative, and the atmosphere in the apartment did not dispose to cultural rest. On the street at the entrance, he saw a neighbor whom his grandmother had called bad names. He glanced at him. "I thought you were from the authorities, but it turns out a very distant relative. But whether she is your relative at all, I don't know exactly." The man was disappointed by the answer. "I was thinking that you will take to yourself this crazy, get rid of us from the evil neighbor. She has poisoned our whole life. She sleeps during the day and watches the street at night. She thought she saw the fuel being drained. But the worst part is the way she talks." Vincent knew exactly what this man wanted from him, but he said firmly, "Contact the police or social services. They will definitely take action." The man was stunned. "But she's your relative. Don't you feel sorry for your grandmother?" If I remember correctly, Aunt Zendasia has children. Let them take care of her." He turned around and walked away from the yard, but he was caught up by the cry of a disgruntled man. "Wait. They'll give you the old man's ass in your old age." Vincent grinned to himself, remembering the same gesture Zendai's grandmother had shown her neighbor. Suddenly a bitter lump came to his throat. He remembered staring out the window for hours, waiting for some of his family to come and visit him at the orphanage. But everyone had forgotten about him. And Aunt Zendaya, too, had never once remembered this nephew's existence. He went to the address his relative had given him at once, but disappointment awaited him there. The aunt and her family had left 12 years ago to the place of her husband's new destination. The line had been severed, and Vincent didn't know what to do next. As he tried to collect his thoughts, an inner voice awoke. "Go to your father. He can help." Vincent had never considered that option. He'd kept the fact that he had a younger sister from his foster parents. The reason for this distrust lay in his distant childhood. He remembered the day of the funeral and how Aunt Nellie had said she didn't want a 6-year-old boy as an extra burden. And he was afraid that if he told his sister's foster parents, they would be, at best, less than thrilled to hear the news. Later, when Vincent was an adult, it didn't make sense to tell them the big secret. But when he found himself at an impasse, the young man realized that his foster father's help could actually have a positive result, because Nicholas had connections even in the internal organs. His parents greeted him with genuine joy. Abi Swan couldn't get enough of him. "Vincent, thank you for coming. You have no idea how much we missed you." Although Nicholas was not as excited, he was also visibly overflowing with positive emotions. "Son, I'm sorry, but I won't believe that you just showed up. I've learned all your gestures for all the years you've lived with us, and I can see that you're very puzzled about something. What's your business?" Vincent summarized the problem. But the more he went on, the more surprised his father became. Then he asked with a hidden resentment, "Why didn't you say something all this time? If you had told me earlier, we would have found your sister long ago. Are Mom and I such scary people that you were afraid to confide in us?" Vincent felt ashamed of his past suspicions. Only now did he realize that, in spite of his difficulties, these people really loved him. And he didn't hold back. "Forgive me, but I used to think you loved your son, not me." Tears glistened in Abi Swan's eyes. She pressed his head to her breast, as if she were a child. "You've grown up, but you're still the same fool. How can you fake a love that doesn't exist?" Vincent closed his eyes, savoring the warmth that radiated from this woman. His senses overflowed and he wanted out. So he put his lips to Abi Swan's hands and asked softly, "Mommy, forgive me. I'm really a total dumbass." Nicholas watched this touching scene from the sidelines. Vincent thought for a moment that he too had tears in his eyes, but the man quickly got over his feelings. He said cheerfully, "Now, as punishment for your unworthy behavior, you'll have to stay with us for a week." "I'm sorry, Father, but only 3 days. I can't do more. I took a vacation to look for my sister. So every day counts." "Well, don't make excuses. I'll try to get some information." Nicholas kept his promise, and it took him only 2 days to find out the whereabouts of Kira Wilder. Aunt Nellie and her husband had adopted the girl, and now she had a different middle name, Stevenson. True, Vincent was not sure that the owner of this personal data is his own sister, so the guest period at the foster parents' house had to be shortened. As he said goodbye, Nicholas asked, "Vincent, maybe I should come with you. You know I'm going on a training camp soon." "No, Father, you shouldn't risk your health. It's a long journey, and the heat's so hot even the young can't stand it. I'll keep you informed. I'll be sure to let you know when it's all cleared up." "Okay, I'll take you up on that." The next morning, Vincent hit the road. Gornozavodsk did not make a favorable impression on Vincent. It was a small provincial town that lived a measured life. When he reached his destination, the heat of midday had changed to a light evening chill, and the locals were going about their business. They gave him a few leering glances, but no one asked him anything. Vincent's first order of business was to get a place to sleep, and he asked a woman who was passing by, Can you tell me where you have a decent hotel around here? The woman laughed for some reason. No, we have a hotel and a hotel are the same thing. It's just around the corner. He went in the indicated direction and in 10 minutes checked in, leaving his things in a single room, which the receptionist proudly called suite. The man decided to take a walk. For a whole day of traveling, he was very tired and hungry. But there were no vacancies in the restaurant, which was located on the first floor of the hotel. Vincent cursed without anger. What a province. I guess the locals like to have a good time. He looked around and saw a kiosk with a crowd of people near it. Vincent walked over to the kiosk and smelled the distinctive aroma of an oriental dish. His memory immediately responded to that familiar gastronomic odor. He remembered walking with his little sister Becky and his mother in the park when he was a child, and they were also selling shawarma. He asked hopefully, "Mommy, it smells so good, will you buy us some?" His mother tugged his arm painfully. "I don't have money for such delicacies. Eat what you're given. And don't get distracted." Vincent still remembered how his mouth filled with saliva and his stomach rumbled loudly. His mother had dragged him and his sister away from the deli stand, but he'd looked around and seen strangers eating shawarma and drinking Coca-Cola. Perhaps it was the memory of an unsatisfied childhood desire that awakened a vicious appetite and hunger. He ordered a double portion. The satisfied stall owner began to fuss, anticipating a generous tip. He quickly prepared the order and wished the unfamiliar customer, "Eat to your heart's content. I have the most delicious shawarma. You will eat today and you will come back tomorrow." Vincent thanked the talkative businessman and sat down at a free table. But it seemed that he had overdone it, because he was quickly satiated with the colorful dish. There was still a second portion left untouched on the disposable plates. He was about to leave when suddenly a timid voice was heard nearby. "Uncle, if you don't eat, can I eat this?" He turned sharply and saw a skinny girl about 6 or 7 years old. The little girl was staring greedily at her plate, and that look made Vincent a little uncomfortable. "Wait, little girl, why finish it? I'll order you a new one. Why don't you sit here?" He was sickened by the thought of the girl eating the shawarma in front of him. He rushed to the kiosk and asked the clerk, "Another portion, please, and a bottle of water." While he was at the kiosk, the girl sat peacefully at the table and kept her eyes on the plate of food. The owner himself brought a fresh portion. "Help yourself, please." The girl ate very carefully. She was careful not to drop a single crumb, wiping her fingers with a napkin. Vincent thought that this little girl had been taught proper table manners, indicating a good upbringing. Children from dysfunctional families don't usually have these skills. But he didn't feel comfortable asking her questions, so he waited for the right moment. His body was sweating from the incomprehensible excitement. Vincent took out a handkerchief and rubbed his neck vigorously. The sudden movement made his cross pop out. The girl stopped chewing and stared at the cross. "Is it yours?" Vincent nodded. "Yes. I had a little sister when I was little, and we were baptized together in church by my grandmother. It's my most prized possession. I've worn it all my life. You like it?" "Yes, I like it very much." The girl carefully wiped her hands and carefully pushed the empty plate away. She looked at Vincent and suddenly said, "My name is Emily." The man extended his right hand to her. "Nice to meet you." "I'm Vincent. I'm here on very important business and I was hungry, so I thought I'd grab a bite to eat. How far away do you live? Maybe I should walk you home." "It's late. My parents will be worried." The girl didn't answer. Vincent interpreted her silence as a child's reluctance to reveal where she lived. "Your mother doesn't let you talk to strange men, does she?" The girl nodded affirmatively. "Your mom is good. She's right, because casual acquaintances can be dangerous for little girls. Listen, you and I will do this. I'll go to the store, buy you something tasty. You wait here for me. Deal?" The girl nodded again in agreement. Not far from the kiosk, the sign of the shopping center was shining, and the man headed there. He quickly bought a small set of groceries and ran back to the kiosk. But the girl was no longer there. "She's gone," Vincent sighed. He glanced at the table where he'd been indulging in his gastronomic pleasure. The plate of shawarma he hadn't eaten was empty too. Vincent realized that the girl had taken the rest of his dinner with her. Poor thing. Why did she run away? Where am I supposed to put all this food? A little frustrated, he headed toward the hotel and placed the bag of groceries in the refrigerator in his room. After a tiring day, he showered and went to bed. Sleep immediately hit him. He was awakened by a cautious knock on his door. The sweet sleep didn't want to let him go, so Vincent looked at the clock, then out the window. My God, it was only 8:30. Who's come to get me this early? Probably the maids. The knocking came again, and he had to get up. What was his surprise when, opening the door, he saw Emily, the girl from yesterday. The little girl said politely, "Good morning. My aunt told me you lived here." The little girl pointed toward the front desk. Vincent had no choice but to invite her into his room. "You're here for a reason, aren't you?" Emily looked at him with wide eyes. There was something painfully familiar in that childish gaze. The girl was scrutinizing him, too. After a long pause, she said, "My mother sent me to you. She is very sick now, so she cannot come herself." "And why did your mother send you to me?" "We don't know each other at all." Vincent was amused at this ridiculous suggestion, but the little guest suddenly cried. "Mommy wanted to go herself, but she's not feeling well. She didn't get sick before and she went to work. We had plenty of food. Mommy always bought me ice cream on Sunday, but now she can't even get up. What would happen if Mommy died?" Vincent rushed over to the baby and began to comfort her. "Emily, please don't cry. I'll get my things together and we'll go to your mommy. And you sit here for now." The man sat the still sobbing girl in the chair. He really wanted to distract her from her sad thoughts. "Listen, Emily. You ran away yesterday, and I bought a whole bag of food for you. You haven't had breakfast yet." Vincent went to the refrigerator and pulled out a bag of colorful pictures. "Here, see what's in there. I'm going to wash up." The girl's face perked up at the sight of the food package and she began to examine its contents. Vincent spent no more than 5 minutes on his morning routine. When he was back in the room, the guest was eating a muffin with gusto. The man marveled once more at the child's thinness, but said cheerfully, "That's it? I'm ready. Take me to your mom." They wandered through the streets of the town until they came to the outskirts, where small houses huddled together. The private sector made Vincent's eyes grow dull. Until that day, life had never thrown him into such sad places. He was more accustomed to the tidy appearance of country villages. Here, poverty screamed from almost every house. Emily took his hand. "We live on an apartment in that house." The girl pointed with her hand at a dilapidated structure, painted in dark blue. The window caps, contrary to the notion of harmony, were painted in a poisonous orange color. Vincent was impressed by this unusual palette and thought, what a tasteless thing to do. What a wild combination. But he didn't have time to say what he thought, because Emily beat him to it. "Isn't it beautiful? My mom painted it. The landlady asked her to paint it. But she wouldn't give me the money for the paint. My mom cried. Then Uncle Sergey brought us 2 buckets of paint." Vincent only nodded, because he wasn't going to memorize the names of complete strangers. He did not ask who Uncle Sergey was, but the girl herself revealed the secret of this character. "Uncle Sergey is our neighbor. He works at the construction site. He has a wife, Aunt Olga. She also sometimes helps us. They always feel sorry for my mom, because she is an orphan. And I'm an orphan too, because I don't have a daddy." Vincent interrupted the girl. "You have a mom, so you're not an orphan." At this point, they reached the gate, which was barely holding. "Don't open it too much, or it'll break off again. There's no one to repair it," Emily warned. "Uncle Sergey, you said yourself that he helps you." "He helps, but not for nothing. And now we don't even have money for bread because my mom doesn't work." As they wandered through the nooks and crannies of the private sector, the sun was already high and burning the ground. Vincent was anxious to get away from the heat, but as soon as he crossed the threshold of the house, the smell of mold and mustiness hit his nose. The man couldn't help but grimace. Emily looked at him understandingly and explained the origin of the odor. "I don't like the way it smells in here either. My mom says a fungus ate the house, but the landlady doesn't charge us much rent." A woman's cold voice came from far away. "Emily, did you come alone?" came a woman's voice. Vincent stepped forward with determination. "No, I'm here to visit." He walked from the dark hallway into a brighter, smaller room. "Emily said you wanted to see me, and I'd like to know why you're so interested in me," Vincent began, but stopped short. Because the same eyes as Emily's were looking at him from under the blanket. But there was something else about the woman's pained face that made him wince. It was a prominent scar above her right eyebrow, the exact same mark his little sister had. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Emily's mother opened her palm and Vincent saw a cross just like his. "Emily told me that the kind man who fed her had the same cross. That's why I asked her." The man immediately understood everything and rushed to the bedside. "Marina. Sis, if you knew how long I was looking for you." The woman from excitement strongly coughed. "Are you my brother? But my aunt did not say anything to me. I didn't even know I had a brother." A new fit of coughing prevented the woman from speaking. Vincent looked at her sympathetically, then at Emily. "We need to get your mom better first, and then we can talk. What do you think, Emily?" The girl rushed to him. "Mommy's brother, you're not leaving?" "Of course not, little girl. I didn't come looking for you so long to leave at once. I can't leave you in such a difficult situation. Emily, will you stay here with Mommy? I won't be long." Vincent went to the neighboring house, where, according to the girl, lived a kind Uncle Igor, who had sold them paint cheaply. A neighbor with a doll on her head was waiting for him at the gate. She gave Vincent an appraising look. "What are you, the neighbor's new boyfriend?" "No, I'm her brother. Does she often have men over?" The neighbor's eyes widened. "God forbid. I've never seen one. Then why the questions?" "Yes, that's what I thought," Vincent nodded. "She's a lonely woman who needs a man," she said, clearly flirting. But Vincent wasn't interested in compliments. "Kira's very sick. Can you tell me how to call a doctor?" The smile disappeared instantly from the woman's face. "I'll be right back." The neighbor ran briskly down the path to the house, but stopped halfway. "What's wrong with her? What are her symptoms? When you call an ambulance, they always ask about that. A bad cough and a fever." For about an hour, they waited for the paramedics. The doctor first examined the woman with a critical eye, and when he listened to her lungs, he said in an anxious voice, "There is wheezing on both sides. We need urgent hospitalization." Despite the treatment, Kira's condition remained serious. Vincent had to stay in town because he had no one to leave little Dariana with. When Kira felt a little better, she told her brother her story. As she recounted her misadventures, the man's fists clenched tighter and tighter. Kira hadn't even been 3 years old when the tragedy had struck, so she didn't have the meager memories that had helped Vincent find her. Her aunt had taken the girl with her to the other side of the world, where her husband worked. Stephen didn't work in the usual sense of the word. The man was the owner of one of the mining companies. In the dashing 90s, he managed to orient himself correctly, and now enjoyed all the benefits of life. After all, the company steadily brought income, which provided a constant growth of personal capitals of Stephen's family. The businessman gave his consent to the adoption of an absolutely alien to him girl, not out of compassion for the unfortunate child. He pursued a completely different goal: to create a positive image. Therefore, this event he did not hide from the public, but on the contrary, he arranged a grand celebration on this occasion. About the good heart of Stephen and his wife, then a month wrote in newspapers and told on television. In a word, the PR campaign was successful. The reputation of the businessman only strengthened. The man even praised his wife for it. Amelie is a clever girl. She came up with the idea. I wouldn't have thought of it myself. Now I can safely run for governor, Stephen said. Nayli was afraid of her husband in her heart, because during their 15 years together he had repeatedly shown his despotic character. She would never have dared to offer to foster another man's child. But she liked the unfortunate woman's daughter very much. Nayli did not expect her husband to give his consent so quickly and began to hurry with the paperwork. With her connections, it was possible to pass this procedure quickly. But Nayli, for fear of angering her husband, did not tell him what family the girl came from. The truth was revealed 5 years later. Kira, for the rest of her life, remembered this terrible scene when Stephen, in anger, shouted at his wife, "You have no idea how you set me up. What the hell were you thinking when you took a girl from an alcoholic mother? There's no telling how bad heredity will play out in the future." Nayli was trying to justify what she'd done. "But Steve, it's not the kid's fault he has a mother like that." The man became even more furious. "I don't care about her at all. Don't try to make me feel sorry for her. It won't work. But I ask that from this day on, this woman does not come into my sight. Where can I put her? It's been years," Nayli pleaded. "Give her to an orphanage. If you have nothing better to do, get a dog. All the ladies of high society do that." Nayli tried to make one last but most powerful argument. "Steve, imagine how happy the tabloids will be when it's revealed that you've given the poor kid up to the orphanage. They'll talk about your name for a year, or even more, and it will reflect badly on your future career." Stephen slumped back in his chair. "You're right, aren't you? For the first time, I have to admit it. Still, try to keep the girl out of my sight. Let her live in the country, help our housekeeper. It'll do her some good." The next day, Nayli took the girl to the country village. Kira was crying. The foster mother first affectionately, then with irritation calmed her down. "Why are you crying? You are incredibly lucky that you have fallen into good hands. And nothing will happen to you if you live in the village. There's a school there. You'll study, you'll make new friends." For 2 months, Kira got used to life in a new place. She was lucky that her housekeeper Vivian treated her well. Once a month on weekends, the foster parents came to the cottage, and then Kira went to live in the outhouse. Stephen had ordered it. But life prepared a new test for the orphan. She was about 10 years old when Vivian said in passing, "I don't know why, Kira. All the trouble is falling on your poor head." The girl froze with a bad feeling. Something happened to Nayli's mom, didn't it? It did. They'd have a baby of their own. Kira was too young to understand the dangers of having another baby in a businessman's family. But she remained in ignorance for a short time. Suddenly, in the middle of the week, Stephen himself appeared and ordered the housekeeper, "Vivian, pack up the girl and I'll take her into town with me." The woman rushed to fulfill the errand. The man looked at the girl with an unkind look. "She's all grown up. It's time to repay the money spent on you. Will you look after your brother?" Kira was afraid to argue, but still asked, "What about school?" "They promised to send my drawings to a competition." Stephen laughed. He laughed until he was in tears, and afterwards he even stroked Kira's head. "Thank you for making me laugh. Although my mood has lifted a bit. I didn't even know I had a budding talent in the house. Another Picasso on the rise. Now seriously, you'll still go to school, of course, but I can't promise you any other hobbies." Kira hadn't enjoyed life much before, but she never thought that her existence could one day turn into a real hell. Little Emin was only 3 months old, but he was a big, strong boy. The baby had a capricious nature and demanded to be carried in her arms. For a teenage girl, this became an impossible responsibility. Her back and arms ached. One day she complained to Nayli, "Emin is so heavy, I can't lift him." The woman looked angrily at her adopted daughter. "What did you just say that for? Do you think I will cry out of pity for you? Do you like eating for free? You don't like babysitting your brother. It can't be helped." After Emin's birth, Nayli's attitude towards the girl changed a lot. If before she sometimes showed pity and compassion, now she was always yelling at Kira, and sometimes she used her fists. Once the girl was late at school because they had an event dedicated to Women's Day. She had prepared a gift for Nayli, a small box made of paper and painted with patterns. Everyone in the class looked at her work with delight, and the teacher even said, "What a lovely thing. Your mother will be so happy." But Nayli met Kira at the door. The look on her face didn't bode well. "Where have you been?" "Almost 2 hours late. I had an appointment at the beauty parlor." The girl handed her mother an original gift. "We had a celebration at school. We congratulated Mom. This is a present for you." Nayli threw the box on the floor and started stomping on it. "I don't want your presents. Take your box to your dead mother's grave. Let her be happy in the next world." Kira rushed to save her work, and the angry woman roughly threw her aside. The girl hit the door jamb painfully and screamed. Rose bent over her. "Why are you yelling like a baby? You'll wake the baby." Emin was crying in the nursery, and Kira had to go to soothe the baby. All day long she cried. In her soul she hated the boy, because of whom her life had become a living hell. In the evening, Nayli came into her room. "If you're late again, you'll kick me out of the house. Do you understand?" Nayli asked threateningly. Kira whispered quietly. "Understood, Mommy. And stop calling me Mommy. You're just like that to me. You're not a mare's tail. I have my own son. Thank God." Nayli cut her off. That was the final verdict for Kira's future. Since there was no help for her, she began to think about how she could escape from slavery. Of course, the girl could not even dream of entering the institute. Stephen himself ordered her fate when school was coming to an end. "Will you go to college? At least you'll get some kind of profession. Nayli, see where you can get her a job so she can earn a living. It's time for her to be on her own. You've been supporting her for too long." Nayli got the girl into a construction college. Bricklaying is a lucrative profession. If you're not stupid, you'll always have money. There's a comfortable dormitory. You'll get a scholarship. Nayli made it clear that Kira was no longer welcome in their home. Even Emin, whom she had raised, was openly mocking. "For losers like you, the only place for losers like you is on the construction site or in the garbage dump. And I'll become a businessman because my dad has no money." Kira did not want to argue with a spoiled boy. Soon she packed her things and moved into the college dormitory. Contrary to anxious expectations, within the walls of the educational institution she waited for an interesting life. There were constantly held exciting events, hobby groups. Kira immediately enrolled in the art studio, where her talent was noticed by a young teacher, Richard. This guy worked at the college for only a year, but during this time he managed to get an army of admirers. Girls deliberately visited his studio to talk to the attractive master. Kira also secretly sighs for him, but even afraid to hope for reciprocity from Richard. The young teacher, though he behaved with restraint, did not refuse the attention of female students. He tried to give time to each admirer, but it did not come to a serious relationship. The girls in the group sighed enviously. Lucky to be the one who wins Richard's heart. His mom is also a college professor, and his dad is in a high position. Kira also sighed furtively, but never entered into such conversations. The girl cherished the rare minutes and hours that Richard devoted to her personally. After all, her works were sent to regional exhibitions, where they always took first place. Therefore, the teacher considered it his duty to develop the talent of his ward to perfection. One day he left Kira after class. "Kira, I have a suggestion for you. Would you like to study on an individual program?" "I'd like that very much. And rightly so. You have certain abilities, but they need to be developed to develop them into a talent. I admit, I'm also fond of painting and I have my own studio. My father financed it, so I can in my free time to study with you." The girl was confused. "But Richard, I don't have the means to pay for such lessons." The young man exclaimed with excitement. "Altruistic. Don't you dare even think about money." It was a magical time. Kira rushed to Richard's studio every evening after college. At first, they only did creative work, but one day he himself suggested a little walk before going to bed. Then they went to the movies together. And once the man even invited her to a restaurant. Naive girl knew nothing about the intrigues of courtship. She thought that Richard was enchanted by her and would soon propose, so she agreed to continue the evening after the restaurant in his studio. A glass of champagne, to put her guard down, and she melted into the arms of the experienced lover. After that unforgettable night, Richard became even more insistent in courting the girl. He gave her flowers and small gifts. In Kira's ears already sounded the wedding march, when suddenly came sobering. After 2 months of secret meetings in the studio, the girl realized that she was pregnant. She expected Richard to take this news with joy, but the man clutched his head. Kira, how could this have happened? You're not a young girl who doesn't know about contraception, Richard said reproachfully. Kira was confused. But I really don't know about it. And then I thought you'd be pleased. Glad? What do you mean? A baby. Did you really think I'd marry you? I'm sorry, but I already have a fiancé, and we're getting married this summer. Richard, what about me? What am I supposed to do? That's not my problem. Ask the girls in your group, they'll tell you where to go. But don't talk to me again. And we need to stop seeing each other. Kira did not immediately understand the meaning of the words spoken by his favorite man. She still in her heart hoped that he would change his mind and call her. But Richard defiantly avoided the girl, and soon came to the end of her studies in college. Kira did not tell any of her fellow students about her trouble. She decided to turn to Nayli for help. But when her foster mom found out about her situation, she wouldn't even let her in the house. I knew it. I had a gut feeling this was going to happen. How can a bad seed grow into a good plant? Go, Kira, and deal with your own problems. I have enough to worry about with Dick. The girl was desperate. She didn't know what to do or how to act. Suddenly she remembered her housekeeper, Vivian, and at her own risk went to her in the country. Although this woman was not known for her kindness, she still sheltered the pregnant girl. I won't refuse to help you, of course, because that would be inhumane. But I warn you, be quiet and don't bring anyone to my house. You realize you don't belong in a businessman's house. My house is not luxurious, but it's a good place to live. So Kira stayed with Vivian until the birth of her daughter. They did not need money, because Kira worked part-time as a repairman at private cottages. One day Vivian gave Kira a good idea. I have a childhood friend who lives in Durham. I want to move there in my old age. If you're interested, come with me. I'm sure there's a job for you there, and I'll look after Gracie. I'm getting used to the girl. I'm used to you too. You're like family to me now. Soon they moved to a small town. Vivian didn't stay long in the new place. The climate there was bad for her health, and after a year or so the woman died suddenly, and Kira was left alone again with a small child in her arms. A friend of the deceased patroness was not so merciful, but did not kick out a single mother with a child on the street. She offered Kira favorable, in her opinion, terms of rent of dilapidated housing. But she was glad for the opportunity. While Vince listened to his sister's story, he had experienced a whole range of feelings. But now he realized he'd been luckier than the fragile, teenage-looking woman. Kira was breathing heavily, exhausted from the experience and the long conversation. He leaned over her. It's all behind you, sister. We'll be together now. He pulled his cross from behind his back and kissed it. I marvel at the foresight of old people. If our grandmother hadn't wanted to baptize us then, we probably wouldn't have found each other. Did you pay attention to the downside? Kira smiled through her strength. Yes, my name is engraved there. The first time I saw it was when I was still out of school, but I wouldn't show my cross to Nayli. I was afraid she'd take it away from me. She never told me anything about you or Grandma. While they were talking, Dariana was busy with her dolls. Vincent gave his niece 2 dolls with sets of clothes. The girl was delighted with the gift. Wow, I have 2 girlfriends now. The girls will die of envy. In addition to the toys, Vincent bought her a tracksuit and a beautiful dress. The little girl liked the clothes too. Uncle Vincent, do you have a lot of money? Why do you spend money on us? It's my pleasure to spend money on such wonderful girls. I'll tell you a secret. When we get home, I'll buy you so many clothes that they won't fit in your closet." Dariana squealed with delight. Kira asked anxiously, "Do you want to take us back to your place?" Big Brother asked, "Do you have other plans? How can I leave you here alone? Why do you have to worry?" The man became serious. "Kira, let's make a deal that from this day forward, you will never ask me stupid questions again. Do you really think I've been looking for you for so long just to leave you? You have no idea how much I've prayed to God or the angels all these years. I don't remember anymore, but my main dream was to find you." Kira smiled, a blush appearing on her weary face for the first time in days. "Vince, I will obey you in everything. I want to tell you, too, that even now I'm afraid to believe I'm happy." The Swan family was about to leave for the town market when the doorbell rang. Abby looked at her husband suspiciously. "Nicholas, who could it be? Or again your domino partners showed up?" The man began to persistently refute this version. "What are you immediately on me? Maybe it's someone from the neighbors came for salt, or someone ran out of laundry detergent." "Don't look at me like that. Open the door." Abby headed for the hallway with a disgruntled look, but she was immediately shouted at. "Vincent, you're unannounced as usual. My father and I almost went to the market." Nicholas also came out to greet the long-awaited guest. Vincent made his way to his parents' apartment, and not alone. "Kira, Dariana, don't be afraid, come in. He's found his sister after all. Well done. You did the manly thing." The arrival of the guests startled the couple, but it was Abby who was the most excited. "What's the market now? We'll send the men out for groceries, and we'll make a nice healthy meal." "Dariana, will you help Grandma Abby?" "Yeah, I'm always helping my mom, and I can even peel potatoes." "That's fine, but I'm not going to give you a sharp knife just yet. You'll be our backup," said Abby. "And you, Kira, feel free to get used to it. We're a family now." A year passed. Indeed, Kira and Dariana had found a real family. Vincent wanted them to live in his apartment, but the foster parents didn't want to let the girls go. They were so attached to them, they couldn't imagine life without them. "Let them stay with us. We've already found a school, and there will be a job for Kira," Nicholas said. He himself took care of the girls' employment. She started working as a restorer at a historical site. There the young woman met an artist who soon proposed to her. In short, everyone's life got better. Only Vincent himself continued to be a bachelor. But the man knew that he still had the most interesting things ahead of him. It was just that the angels had not yet sung a song for him.